around. Kids are young boys and girls, are young men and women, for that matter, are already on vapes, and that's why I'm here, of course, to make sure that as a former chair of the Committee on Health, we want to make sure that this will be regulated, no? And doon po ako nagtataka no bakit napunta sa DTI. So, I'm here to listen, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator JV. I also have a copy of Senator Joel Villanueva's opening statement. He asked that we insert this in the record. But let me just state that he basically expresses concern due to tobacco-related diseases. And I'll read an excerpt, no, from Senator Joel. Kaya nga po tayo ay nalulungkot at nababahala nang marinig natin na sa ikalimang pagkakataon nagawaran ng Global Alliance for Tobacco Control ang Pilipinas ng Dirty Ashtray Award. Bakit po ito nangyari at bakit hinayaan ng ating mga health officials na mangyari ito? We need to get to the bottom of this because we do not want to harm the country's reputation with regards to strengthening health regulations, including tobacco control. In today's hearing, we want to hear from the officials of the DOH and the other members of the Philippine delegation on what transpired and to make the responsible persons accountable for this incident. So yan, so we insert his entire speech into the record. So I will proceed with my opening statement. Bakit may ano? Sa kabila ba yun? Saan ba yan? Is it a hearing? Pwede kaya lang, maano lang ng konting-konti. Medyo nakaka-distract lang. I'll proceed with my opening statement. On the event of the WHO FCTC, otherwise known as the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control Conference held in Panama City from February 5 to February 10, the Global Alliance for Tobacco Control, a civil society alliance group whose mission is to unite the global tobacco control community and serve as the voice of civil society to accelerate implementation of the WHO FCTC, awarded the notorious Dirty Ashtray to the Philippine delegation for the 5th time for blocking global tobacco control efforts on the last day of the 10th session of the said conference. The Dirty Ashtray Award is a well-known publicly recognized award to call out those influenced by lobbying from the tobacco industry. The criteria to earn this award is when public officials succumb to or when the government accepts, supports, or endorses policies or legislations in collaboration with the tobacco industry. Bakit tayo nagkaroon ng Dirty Ashtray Award? Why would we want our Philippine delegation associated with the Dirty Ashtray Award? Why would we want to be known as succumbing to the lobby of the tobacco group? This is the question that I will ask all of you. Imbis na itaguyod at ipaglaban ang kalusugan ng mamamayang Pilipino, nag-attend ang napakaraming opisyales dito sa WHO event. So kasama din yung gusto nating alamin. Wala ho akong problema, hindi ko ho issue, nag-a-attend tayo ng conference. Nag-a-attend din po ako ng conference. Pero itong conference na to, ang Philippines ang may pinakamalaking delegation. At ang delegation natin ay kasama dito, and please correct me if I'm wrong when I give you the floor. Of course, we have our head of delegation, Attorney Hubert Guevara from the Office of the President, Deputy Executive Secretary. Then we also have the Department of Foreign Affairs, the Department of Health, along with the Department of Health is Food and Drug Administration. Sa inyo naman talaga to because it is a WHO event. And then there is the Department of Trade, there's the National Tobacco Administration, There is the Department of Agriculture. Saan dito yung representatives natin from Department of Agriculture? Pero iba ka pa, no? Iba ka pa. You're from NTA, right? Yeah. So separately, as far as I know, and maybe you can just confirm the list of your delegation, Secretary Guevara, may Department of Agriculture din na nag-attend. Then there's Department of Interior and Local Government. Yes, nag-attend din kayo. Then meron ding from PLLO. Dami. Lahat kayo. So I will want to hear from all of you what your participations were in that conference and what your knowledge is about the dangers of tobacco and e-cigarettes, HTPs. I will test your knowledge because if you're attending these conferences, then I'm assuming that you are going to be participating there in a substantial way. And then, did I mention DepEd? Hindi ko yata nabanggit si DepEd, but DepEd was also present, no? Kayo mismo. Yeah, okay. And you should be there because the children are the targets of these novel tobacco product companies and of course still the tobacco companies. And then later on, I'll also acknowledge the resource persons coming from the civil society, no? But I was just mentioning the names, the agencies that were present there. So before I turn over the floor to the head of delegation to give your opening remarks or your position paper, I just want to make sure that the public that is watching this Blue Ribbon hearing knows enough to understand why I call this hearing for the Blue Ribbon. So during the pandemic, there were a lot of reported cases, and we have, yeah, can you show it? There were a lot of, they're known as EVALI cases. Ito yung e-cigarettes or vaping use associated lung injury. So all of this was in the news. No, I would say 5 years ago, I didn't even know what an e-cig is. I didn't even hear of it. What we see are people smoking. But in the last maybe half a decade, yun na nga, naging common sa atin to hear of people vaping, for people using e-cigs. That's a common terms used, but there are technical terms for this that differentiates one from the other, HTPs, novel tobacco products, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, the ill effects of these products are undisputed. And you can see from these pictures the unquestionable adverse effects of e-cigarettes to the health. Nakakamatay at nakakasira ng buhay ng mga tao, including ang mga kabataan natin. 1 in 5 adult Filipinos are currently tobacco users. That's 1 in 5, so 20%. That's not something to be proud of. Sa mga bata naman, ages 13 to 15, 12.5%, which is equivalent to around 762,000 students, are currently tobacco users. When it comes to vapes and e-cigs, as of 2021, 2.7 million Filipinos are vape users. Is that small? Is that big? Well, think about it this way. 5 years ago, may vape users ba? O ngayon, may vape users na tayo. And the studies show, the research shows that most people do not shift from cigarette smoking to vape or e-cig using. They become dual users. This is not a health hearing, so I will not go into the details, but I need to explain because we have students, we have reporters, and they need to understand bakit ba napunta sa Blue Ribbon to. Dahil ang Blue Ribbon, kailangan iniintindi niya kung ginagawa ng government officials ang trabaho nila. So kung ang Department of Health, trabaho nilang kalusugan, ina-expect ko sila ang mag-iintindi nun. So kung yung ibang government officials nakikialam doon, nanggugulo pa, kailangan ko din malaman yon dahil hindi na nila trabahong manggulo. And it becomes a crime if they are doing that. So about 14%, 1 in 7 students aged 13 to 15 say they are now currently using e-cigarettes. I ask you, those of you sitting here, may anak ba kayo? I have a 13-year-old son. Once a week, natatanong ko siya kung alam niya yan, alam niya bawal, but I am so scared. When is that day that it's going to be an uso thing for him and his friends? And then mababalitaan nila sa news na Dirty Ashtray Award tayo. Dahil pinaglalaban ng mga officials natin na, and I'll just highlight this one thing that is very upsetting to me. Article 9 and 10 specifically of the convention refer to the need to report. I will read it to you. No, that's not Article 9 and 10. Okay, ito na. Here in the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, there's Article 9 and Article 10. Article 9 deals with regulation of the content of tobacco products. Article 10 deals with regulation of tobacco product disclosure. So sa madaling salita, Article 9 says, kailangan magkaroon ng testing, measuring of the contents and emissions of tobacco products and to regulate it. Article 10 says, i-disclose to, ipaalam sa publiko. Kasi ang lumalabas na information galing sa mga tobacco and sa mga companies that sell vapes and e-cigarette is mas okay sa'yo yan, healthy sa'yo yan. So sabi ng WHO framework, i-disclose nyo, kailangan sabihin nyo sa tao, ano yung laman ng mga produktong yan? Ano laman ng vape? May asido ba yan? Anong chemicals meron yan? Nakakamatay ba yan? Nakakakalbo ba yan? Nadudurog ba yung laman loob mo dyan? Hindi ko alam. Hindi ko nga alam eh. So we should know. Yun lang naman ang sabi ng Article 9. I-disclose nyo. O di ba pag bumili kayo ng pagkain, canned goods, nakasulat doon kung ano yung laman ng canned goods na yun, sodium. Kung may beans man nun, beans. Kung bawal ka sa karne, alam mo, ay may karne dito, hindi ako kakain nito. So dapat, yung nilalanghap mo sa vapes and e-cigs, alam mo din yung laman. Yun ang sabi ng Article 9. I-disclose. To test and measure the content para pag sinabi nila, syempre ano i-disclose nila kung ayaw nila magpa-test? Di kailangan i-test yun, di ba? Para alam kung anong laman nun. Lumagpas ba yun sa percent na safe sa human? Is there such a thing as safe for certain chemicals? Baka wala namang safe. That's why we have to test. And then i-disclose. So sa pagkakaalam ko, and we will now open the floor for the resource persons to speak, ito yung hinarang. Ito yung natagalan at hindi tuloy nabigyan ng resolution. So hindi tayo naka-move forward to create an expert group that would be able to finalize the implementation of these provisions. So babalik tayo ngayon, and my challenge now, and at the end of the hearing, I will ask DOH if they have the political will and the authority to do it, and if they have the support of the other agencies, o sige, kung sabihin yung we are sovereign, kasi meron nakikita akong sa position papers nyo, we are sovereign. Okay, we are sovereign. Kaya natin, we have the political will to test these products, to ensure that the emissions and the contents of these products will be made known to the public so that ang bawat nanay, ang bawat tatay, ang bawat teenager, ang bawat lola at lola, alam nila kung anong nilalanghap nila. That will be my question at the end of the hearing. So on that note, I give the floor to Attorney Hubert Guevara for, I understand you're the head of the delegation. So you can proceed with your opening statement, sir.
Madam Chair, Senator Pia Cayetano, magandang umaga po sa iyo. Senator JV, Ersito, magandang umaga po, sir. Sa mga kasama ko po sa Philippine delegation, magandang umaga to the rest of our government employees and ladies and gentlemen. I am Hubert Guevara, Senior Deputy Executive Secretary of the Office of the President, Office of the Executive Secretary. I'm the head of the delegation to COP10 on the Conference of the Parties of the WHO Framework, Convention on Tobacco Control. Madam Chair, the delegation went about drafting the national statements expressing the country's position with respect to each agenda item of the 10th Conference of the Parties of the WHO Framework on Convention on Tobacco Control, or the COP10, based on two legislations, Republic Act 9211 and Republic Act 11900, where it says that the government must institute a balanced policy approach in regulating tobacco products, including even novel and emerging products, under Republic Act 11900. These national statements underwent a rigorous drafting process with all agencies, including the Department of Health, comprising the Philippines delegation being well represented and having a voice in drafting each and every word. At one given time, the representatives met for about 7.5 hours straight to complete the draft statements, as can be attested to by the members of the delegation to COP10. These prepared statements can be made available by the Department of Foreign Affairs for the information of this honorable committee. With all due respect, Madam Chair, we were proud of how we conducted ourselves all throughout COP10. We can describe our participation in COP10 as collaborative, flexible, and consensus building, always advocating for a way forward on deadlock issues. We were therefore surprised that on the last day of COP10, we were awarded the Dirty Ashtray. The much emphasized Dirty Ashtray Award was given to the Philippines supposedly for its brazen use of tobacco industry tactics of obstinate, dispute, and delay throughout the COP. Nothing could be further from the truth, Madam Chair. It was claimed that the Philippines joined a minority of parties blocking consensus on the implementation of FCTC 10, Articles 9 and 10. May I stress on the word blocking. It was also claimed that the Philippines proposed a compromise option that further muddled the discussion and caused more delays. For the record, the Philippine statement on Articles 9 and 10 under Agenda 6.1 is as follows, and I quote, Madam Chair. Madam President, we note that certain parties express a preference for the establishment of an expert group, while some others prefer the reactivation of the working group. If we may suggest a third option as a possible compromise, we support the reenactment of the working group composed of state parties working with the expert group, with the latter being accountable to the working group as an advisory and consultative group, the mandate being clearly with the state parties, which cannot be further delegated. We request the Convention Secretariat to provide clear delineation of roles or terms of reference of the working group and the expert group. We are prepared to work with the Secretariat on language to this effect if this will be the preferred option of the conference of the parties. Close quote. Because of our proposal, Madam Chair, the Committee A chairperson decided to form a small group as a subset of the committee to discuss the decision point in depth separately and allow Committee A to continue discussing other agenda items. Committee A chairperson cited the Philippines proposal as a starting point for a middle-of-the-road path that could lead the COP in the consensus on the matter. Unfortunately, even the drafting group composed of state parties was not able to arrive at a consensus or an option other than having an exclusive expert group as option 1 or an exclusive working group as an option 2. Thereafter, the chair raised the possibility of a last option, which was to defer the matter to COP11. The chair then requested for an informal vote to determine which state parties were in favor of deferring the matter to the next COP or COP11. The Philippines did not raise its nameplate to signify concurrence. The chair then revised the question being polled to which state parties were not in favor of deferring the matter to COP11. This is when the Philippines raised its nameplate. And the chair asked the Philippines why it was raising its flag, to which I, as the head of delegation, stated that the Philippines had always been in favor of looking for ways to move forward and was not in favor of deferral, Madam Chair. Hindi po namin ginugulo ang mga debate sa COP10. How can being flexible and proposing a way forward to be deemed a stubborn refusal to change an opinion? We may not have earned an Orchid Award or the award that is polar opposite the Dirty Ashtray Award. But allow me to read an email from the esteemed Dr. Nontavaran Vishit Vadakan, founding Dean of the School of Global Studies in the Faculty of Public Health, Thammasat University, Thailand, and who is the chairperson of the Committee A of COP10, dated February 14, 2024, which is addressed to me, Asik Alba, from my office, and the DOH officials, Yusik David, Asik Ontalan, and Asik Domingo, who are all here. And I quote, "Dear all, as a personal note, I would like to extend my gratitude to the Philippines delegation for your cooperation in reaching a consensus regarding Agenda Item 6.2. Acknowledging the intricacies of the national context of the parties and agreeing to the requests of other parties while upholding your national interests demonstrates the collaborative spirit that is essential in negotiations. I expect that this trend will continue beyond COP11. It was a delight to meet and collaborate with you all, particularly with your distinguished Attorney Hubert Guevara. I hope we will meet again in other platforms in international meetings. Best wishes, Nun Tavarner, or Chair Toy." Madam Chair, I must admit that it was very difficult to articulate a position based on a balanced policy approach. I was very particular with the words I used. Namatay po ang tatay ko dahil sa lung cancer. I saw firsthand the effects of smoking, the pain and suffering it causes. Kaya mahirap po para sa akin ang pagbabalanse ng aking ginawa para protektahan ang karapatan ng lahat ng tao sa pagkabuhay. But if by protecting our state policy, the 20,000 or more families whose lives are dependent on tobacco farming, and the rest of our countrymen who are able to avail of the benefits of our healthcare system, funded by the excise taxes imposed on the sale of tobacco, we are given the Dirty Ashtray Award, then I'm willing to own it up as head of the delegation, Madam Chair. I deeply apologize if this has brought embarrassment to you, Madam Chair, and to our countrymen who may feel the same way. This is not part of my statement, Madam Chair, but I'd just like to put it on record that before I left, flew back to the Philippines, I spoke with all the members of the delegation. I mentioned to the delegation, maybe for COP11, we can come up with an enforcement framework. An enforcement framework in which we can eradicate or mitigate illicit trade of tobacco, and also to stop the sale of e-cigarettes to the minors. And this was well taken, appreciated by the Department of Health, Department of Education, and even the other members of the delegation. And this can be supported by the members who are present here as well. Thank you to the Senate Committee on Accountability of Public Officers and Investigations and the Senate Committee on Health and Demography for this opportunity to provide clarity on this matter, Madam Chair. I'm open and willing to hear any questions from you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
I have a number of questions, no, but I'll hold it for later because I'd like to hear the others. But I was talking to my staff, so I just wanted to be sure I heard you right. So you said towards the end, which is not part of your speech, that you spoke to all the members and your parting message is, let's stop illicit trade of tobacco?
Yeah, to prepare for COP11, Madam Chair, let's look at the possibility of having an enforcement framework to be able to stop the illicit trade of tobacco and the sale of e-cigarettes to minors, Madam Chair.
Okay, I'll give you a chance to elaborate on that, no, because it kind of strikes me the wrong way if your only takeaway after all this is the illicit trade of tobacco, which I understand to be in connection with the smuggling of tobacco. But if when you now added the access of minors, then I understand where it's coming from. So maybe later you can elaborate on that because I'd like to hear more about that. Okay, let's now let me recognize the presence of Senator Tolentino, our former chairperson of the Committee on Blue Ribbon. Sir, do you have any statements?
Well, I'm just here, Madam Chair, to give my full support. And I think I happened to be on my way to another destination when I met some members of the Philippine delegation going to an international meeting somewhere in Geneva or kung saan man, a few weeks ago or a few days ago, nakasabay ko sa Doha sila, papunta doon. Just, bago lang yung event. 2 weeks ago. I think that was the exact date. But I'm here just to show my presence to support the new Blue Ribbon Committee chairperson. Thank you, ma'am.
So I'll call on now DFA, USEC Charles Jose, Office of the Undersecretary for Multilateral Affairs and International Economic Relations. Are you the one speaking on behalf of DFA?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Yes,
And sorry, can I understand, either of you can answer, ano ba, do you have co-heads or are you the sole head? Because I saw in one document, there's co-heads or what? How does it work?
In previous, hi, I'm from the UNIO, UN Office of the DFA, Deputy Assistant
Okay, so
Secretary.
DFA.
Yeah. The UN bodies, they have various standards of how you designate people in delegations. When we looked at COP9, no, during the time of Secretary Locsin, there were various co-heads. The DFA usually follows president. So if there's a secretary level attending, then he will be head of delegation. I think during COP9, 2 years prior, may co-heads.
wala ngayon?
Ngayon po, when we tried doing that, because originally the LOC had at least 3 minister
What
levels.
is LOC?
Sorry, the letters of credence.
Mm.
It's the letter signed by the Secretary of Foreign Affairs telling the head of the secretariat that these are the delegates from the Philippines officially attending the COP or UNGA, various UN meetings. So for this COP, originally, there were at least 4 secretary levels, health, DTI, SDS, and
What's
PLLO.
SDS?
Senior Deputy
Okay.
Executive Secretary.
Okay.
So we tried the co-head route. And then Geneva, the Secretariat of the Tobacco Control, came back to us and said, oh, we really highly encourage, which is diplomatese for, please do this instead, that you name one.
Okay.
So coming from the Office of the President, we designated Senior Deputy Executive
Okay.
Secretary Guevara as
Okay.
head.
Okay.
Thank you. It doesn't preclude other bodies to have various co-heads. It just, in this instance, Geneva came back to us and said, no co-heads, just one head.
Okay.
yes, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Tolentino. Madam Chair, if you will allow me, I would like to read the position paper of the Department of Foreign Affairs. The Department of Foreign Affairs, through the Office of United Nations and International Organizations and the Office of the Undersecretary for Multilateral and International Economic Relations, with the support of the Philippine Mission to the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland, participated in the interagency preparations for Philippine participation in the WHO FCTC COP10, as well as we formed part of the Philippine delegation to the COP in Panama City on February 5 to 10, 2024. Aside from preparing the letter of credentials for the Philippine delegation based on representations by various concerned agencies and branches of government, as well as acting as overall coordinator for the interagency body, the DFA's substantive contribution to the preparations included contextualizing Philippine commitments in the WHO FCTC within the broader lens of Philippine engagement with the WHO, the UN itself, and the country's political and economic priorities on the international and multilateral front. As the WHO FCTC is a highly technical health and regulations related convention, the DFA differs to the positions of the DOH, the DTI, as well as the DILG and DepEd on matters related to health, evidence-based research and policymaking, as well as regulatory action on a national, local, and school-based context. As previously mentioned, the DFA participated in the interagency discussions to draw up Philippine positions on the agenda items tabled for COP10, especially centering around the substantive portions under Agenda Item 6, which is treaty instruments and technical matters, and some sub-items under Agenda Item 7, which is reporting, implementation assistance, and international cooperation. The DFA organized preliminary drafting sessions attended by members of the interagency body in late 2023, which culminated in 3 interagency meetings chaired by the head of the Philippine delegation from the Office of the President on January 4, 10, and 23, 2024. It was during these meetings that the Philippine positions and draft statements on the agenda items of relevance to the Philippine interest were consolidated. The DFA opines that the Philippine delegation to COP10 exhausted the consultations processes to present an objective and accurate accounting of the country's achievements on and ability to continue implementing its commitments under the WHO FCTC. These commitments are anchored on the country's own domestic legislation on tobacco regulation, which include but are not limited to RA 9211 or the Tobacco Regulation Act of 2003, RA 11346 or the Sin Tax Law of 2019, RA 11467 or the Sin Tax Law of 2020, and RA 11900 or the Vape Law. The discussions among the technical officers comprising the interagency body made it clear that the Philippines' approach to tobacco regulation is one of balancing between aiming for the best possible health outcomes for all while still allowing tobacco farmers to positively contribute to the economy. Understandably, some civil society groups, such as the Global Alliance for Tobacco Control, may not agree with this Philippine position. The GATC, which hands out the so-called Dirty Ashtray Award, though a strong advocate for health, may appear to lack a better understanding of the more complex and nuanced realities underlying Philippine legislation. The DFA believes that the Philippines has a strong reputation for being a champion of health within the WHO and throughout the world. The Dirty Ashtray Award, while may be seen as a setback to the country's own dedicated advocacy to Sustainable Development Goal 3 on good health and well-being, should only spur the country to do even more to honor our international commitments by strengthening local legislation and regulations, noting that foreign policy is merely an extension and projection of every sovereign state's domestic policy. Thank you, Your Honor.
Yusek Jose, we had asked for your position papers to be submitted earlier. We didn't get anything from your office. We have always had very full cooperation from DFA because we have other issues which the Blue Ribbon Secretariat is handling, and DFA has been very cooperative. Pero with this issue, ngayon ko lang naririnig yung statement nyo. So nakakandara pa ako copying your statement so that I can make logical and cohesive. I can frame my thoughts to ask you questions. So
yes, Madam Chair. We formulated this position paper last night, and we gave this to our Department Legislative Liaison Unit, and which we trust has conveyed the same position paper to your office.
well, if it's last night, then
yeah.
probably
Maybe
ngayong umaga pa lang and I don't have anything. At least it would have been nice if at the very least, like Secretary Guevara, at least I could follow and make notes, no? So ngayon, I will have you repeat some of your statements because I am not capable of, hindi ako natutong mag-stenography nung ako'y nag-aaral. So
I apologize,
may
Madam
I
Chair,
just
if,
request, no, for next time for all the resource
Mm.
persons to cooperate with us, okay? May I just ask you to repeat that line where you said, toward the latter part of your statement, where you said something like, thank you, yes. Something about, sorry to disappoint some groups, but there's a lack of understanding on the realities of, can you just repeat that statement?
yes, Madam Chair. I mentioned here that the Philippine position tried to balance between health and, you know, the livelihood of our tobacco farmers. And understandably, this position, some civil society groups may not agree with this Philippine position, like the GATC. However, uh, by awarding us with this dirty ashtray, it somehow appears that, you know, because our position is only based on upholding our national legislation, but being awarded this dirty ashtray, somehow it appears that GATC, uh, they need to better understand the more complex and nuanced realities of underlying Philippine legislation.
So can you repeat that slowly? GAT needs to understand the,
They lack understanding of the more complex and nuanced realities underlying Philippine legislation.
saan dito yun? This advocacy, while meritorious, understandably falls short in understanding the more complex and nuanced realities underlying Philippine legislation. Okay.
Just got this straight now.
Sige, I just got this now, so I will digest this a little bit and get back to you later. Thank you. Department of Health, may we call on, no, sorry. Before I call on you, because I don't want to lose my train of thought. You mentioned, I do not see it in your written speech, so I don't know if you made you made some changes on the spot, but in my notes, you said something about a balanced position with health and the livelihood of the farmers. May I know from the Department of Agriculture? Is Department of Agriculture here? Wala. And wala NTA. O sige, with your I defer to you, Attorney Guevara, if you'd like to answer this, or NTA, no? Does anybody debate the data that the poorest sector in our society are the farmers and the fisher folks? They're the poorest, no? And as far as I know, their plight has not been in any way, their life has not improved. Are the tobacco farmers better off because of all these so-called interventions and support that I am hearing from you with this balanced approach? Can any of you present data to me that shows that this balanced approach that you keep on, dalawa pa lang ang speaker and I keep hearing balanced approach, okay. Anong naipala ng ating magigiting na farmers, tobacco farmers specifically, dito sa balanced approach? Who would like to answer that question? Because you stand in the way of the progress of health because of the balanced approach. That's basically what you're saying. Yun yung nuances na sinasabi nyo, Yusek Charles. The nuances is that we cannot fully support health programs because we have to balance the livelihood of farmers. So, ikinabuti ba nila? Yes, sir.
Madam Chair, I don't have the data on how tobacco farming has benefited the farmers. Maybe our um, colleagues from the NTA can provide the data for that one. But when we say a balanced policy approach, we just refer to the laws, the legislation that was enacted by Congress under 9211, which basically says the government shall institute a balanced policy. And likewise, in the vape law or the Republic Act 11900, where it also further declared that the policy of the state to enact a balanced policy. So these are basically
To be clear,
phrases.
the
Yes, sir.
vape law does not elaborate on what they mean by a balanced policy. I'm very familiar with that law because I was the only person who actively fought against that law, and Senator Joel also was very vocal in arguing against some provisions. There was no discussion on what that balanced policy means. So for the record, you can check. There's no discussion on what balanced policy means. So I cannot glean anything from that when you say that it is referred to in that law. Just for your information.
Yes, Madam
because
Chair.
I
Thank
was
you very much
involved.
for the clarification. Yes, I will take note of that, Madam Chair.
So NTA, would you like to tell me if just to keep it short, no? I know you are all busy. I do not intend to keep you here all day. Are the Filipino tobacco farmers better off than other farmers? Dahil sa binibigay na suporta na paulit-ulit kong naririnig, mas maganda ba ang kalagayan ng ating Filipino tobacco farmers? And please do not tell me how much ang nabigay. Tell me, does the data show na hindi na sila impoverished, hindi na sila naghihirap, hindi na sila below minimum wage?
Madam Chair, please allow me to read my statement.
Hindi. Mamaya ka pa.
Okay.
I'm just asking if you don't want to answer that, then I don't need you to answer that. I thought you're raising your hand to answer that question. Kasi si DOH ang next eh. It's up to you. You can say something or you don't have to. I'm just, it's your call. Would you like me to call on you later? Okay. So ang next natin is DOH.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we take this opportunity to express the following points. The first point is that the WHO FCTC is an international health treaty against the tobacco epidemic. Our Constitution provides for an adherence to general principles of international law as part of the law of the land. One of these principles is the basic rule of pacta sunt servanda, or the performance in good faith of a state's treaty obligations. The second point is that it is undisputed that tobacco kills. As the National Technical Authority on Health, the DOH serves as the key executive government agency for promoting tobacco control in the country. The DOH hopes to lead country delegations to the COP of WHO, FCTC, and be granted the privilege of formulating a healthy national position on COP agenda items. The third point is that it is essential for the Philippines to be regarded as adherent to international law, which includes the WHO FCTC. This is important for the Philippines to maintain a reputation as a credible member of the international community. The fourth point is that the composition of the Philippine delegation to COP10, now on query, may be seen as an offshoot of the impression generated by the transfer of regulatory jurisdiction over novel tobacco products like vape from the DOH to the DTI and the balanced approach in a health meeting. The fifth point is that there are other international venues and fora for non-health executive government agencies to represent the country, and this can be coordinated by the Department of Foreign Affairs. And last, and a closing point, Madam Chair, the Department of Health acknowledges the helpful guidance of SDS Hubert Guevara in leading the Philippine delegation at COP10 to strong positions on tobacco control given the circumstances. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Just to complete the DOH family, let's go to Food and Drug Administration, Dr. Samuel Zacate, the Director General.
I would like to my position paper, Madam Chair. The Food and Drug Administration remain committed to our mandate to safeguard the health and welfare, health of the Filipino people, and reiterates our alignment with the position of Department of Health and other health advocates. The FDA is actively developing its regulatory framework and its competency in cooperation and collaboration with the World Health Organization and other international regulatory agencies to regulate these products through development of policies and benchmarking of best practices. The FDA would like also to express its openness to work with the Office of the Senator Pia for moving forward. We continuously engage ourselves in a consultative meeting with the DTI and commit our openness to assist all agencies should it be needed, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Next would be Department of Trade and Industry, USEC Ana Sanchez, USEC and Chief of Staff, the Secretary.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, colleagues. With regards to the concerns as to the implementation of Articles 9 and 10 of the FCTC, the TTI expresses its full support for the implementation of Articles 9 and 10, particularly testing and measuring content and emission and disclosure of emission of tobacco products and disclosure of such, and submits the member states. It only submitted that the member states should be involved in the consultation process during the preparation of policy guidelines. The DTI is still committed to our mandate under RA 11900 and is active in its efforts to promote the right to health and instill health consciousness among Filipino people. In the past months, the DTI has intensified its monitoring and enforcement activities for violations. To date, about 70,000 online stores have been monitored, and about 63,000 online and physical stores were monitored, and about 62,000 were more than 62,000 were issued by show cause orders. DTI has recently partnered with the Union of Local Authorities of the Philippines, ULAP, to raise awareness on the harmful effects of vape and on illegal sale of the product to minors. This engagement includes a communication campaign at the barangay level with the cooperation of LGUs and the national movement of young legislators with the hope of improving enforcement as well. Thank you po.
Thank you. I'll revert to you, DTI. I'm just checking on something. Let's now go to the National Tobacco Administration. Before you proceed with your statement, can you please tell us who are the members of the NTA?
Na part ng delegation, ma'am.
Sorry?
Yung part ng delegation
No,
ng NTA.
no. Under the law, who makes up the NTA? Sino yung
Yung
IAC NTA?
Yung IAC po, ma'am, sa na member lang po yung NTA sa IAC.
So wala tayong hindi kasama dito yung you're not the head of the IAC NTA, you're just the
No,
NTA
ma'am.
administrator.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'll ask later on na lang. Go ahead. Ito nga.
tobacco traders and exporters.
Ay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Please allow me to read my statement. Sa ating kagalang-galang na tagapangulo ng miyembro ng Senate Blue Ribbon Committee, sa mga kapwa kong naglilingkod sa gobyerno, naririto po ngayon, magandang araw po sa ating lahat. Unang-una po, nais naming ipahayag na ang mataas na respeto ng NTA sa privilege speech ng ating kagalang-galang na Senadora Pia Cayetano sa kakatapos lamang ng WHO FCTC Conference of Parties. Gayun din ang aming mataas na paggalang sa karapatan ng bawat mamamayan na makamit ang mataas na pamantayan ng kalusugan sa pamamagitan ng wasto at sapat na kaalaman sa pagpili kung ano ang kanilang kagustuhan na naaayon sa batas. Ang National Tobacco Administration ay ahensya ng gobyerno na may mandato na i-regulate ang industriya ng tabako ng bansa. Ang pangunahing tungkulin ng NTA na nakasaad sa Executive Order number 245 ay ang pag-regulate ng production, standardization, classification, grading at trading ng tobacco leaves at tobacco products. Sa kasalukuyan po, ang NTA ay nagre-regulate ng local na production at trading ng tobacco leaves, import, export, transshipment ng tobacco leaves at tobacco products. Ang NTA ay miyembro po ng Interagency Committee on Tobacco na naitatag sa pamamagitan ng RA 9211. Sa aming pagtaya, magmula ng masimulang taasan ang patuloy na pagtaas ng excise tax sa sigarilyo at paghihigpit ng paggamit nito, bumaba ang lokal na produksyon ng tobacco leaves mula 80 million kilos na ngayon ay 42 million kilos na lamang. Madaming mga magsasaka ang naapektuhan at kalahati sa kanila ay hindi na muling makapagtanim sa labis na naapekto sa kanilang kabuhayan at kanilang pamumuhay. Sa kadahilan ng wala ng ibang produkto pang agrikultura na kasing taas ng kinikita ng magsasaka ng tobacco. Sa totoo lang po hanggang ngayon ang NTA na mahala sa kapakanan ng magsasaka ng tobacco ay nahihirapan magbigay ng alternatibong pagkakakitaan sa mga magsasakang nawalan ng kabuhayan. Bumaba din ang produksyon ng sigarilyo mula 83 billion piraso mula noong 2015. Ito ay bumaba sa 60 billion piraso noong 2021 o mahigit na 23 billion piraso na pagbaba o 28% na pagbaba. Ito ay katumbas ng mahigit kumulan na 60 bilyong excise tax na nawala sa kaban ng bayan na dapat ay napunta sa universal healthcare ng Department of Health na nakatulong sa iba't iba pang proyektong lokal at national government. Sa aming paghihimay sa parehong taon ng 2015 at 2021, bumaba ang naninigarilyo mula 22.7% noong 2015. Ito ay bumaba sa 18.5% o 4.2% na pagbaba. Kung ating susuriin, malaki ang hindi pagkakatugma ng pagbaba ng paninigarilyo at ang pagbaba ng lehitimong produksyon ng sigarilyo. Ang malaking katanungan, saan po nabili ang mga patuloy na naninigarilyo? Ang sigarilyo kanilang ginamit, dumaan ba ito sa tamang quality control? Sa aming pagtataya, ang patuloy na pagtaas ng excise tax ay nangangahulugang patuloy din ang pagtaas ng illegal na sigarilyong apektado ang mga magsasaka at ang mga maliliit na manggagawa na dumidepende sa industriya. Ang smuggling ng illegal na sigarilyo ay isa sa mga maituturing na pinakamabigat na suliranin ng ating bayan. Sa kabilang banda, tama rin po na protektahan natin ang kalusugan ng bawat mamamayan, lalong-lalo na ang mga kabataan. Turuan natin sila upang magkaroon sila ng sapat na kaalaman sa masamang epekto ng paninigarilyo. Nararapat lamang na magkaroon ng regulasyon sa industriya ayon sa ating mga batas. Isa po akong kawani ng NTA kasama ang iba pang mga kawani ng gobyerno na lumahok sa nasabing pagtitipon ng mga iba't ibang bansa. Ito yun po ang aking unang pagkakataon na mapasali sa delegasyon at aktibong nakilahok sa paggawa ng mga pambansang posisyon sa mga usapin at pagtalakay ng pagtitipon na yun. Bilang baguhan sa larangang ito, nasaksihan ko kung gaano kahirap magbalanse ng mga polisiya para higpitan ang paggamit ng mga produktong may kinalaman sa tabako at mga e-cigarette at vapes. Nakita ko ang mga punto ng bawat bansa, ang ilang gustong pahintuin at paggamit ng produkto, at ng ilan naman ay higpitan ang paggamit nito. Bawat panig ay may kanya-kanyang basihan, may personal na dahilan, at ang iba may dahilang dapat isaayon sa batas ng bawat bansa. Ang aking nasaksihan sa captain ay may hihantulad sa isang barya na may dalawang muka, ang kanan at kaliwa. Iyon ay kung ito ay mananatiling nakatayo. Ngunit paano kung ang barya ay nakataob or nakahiga? Iisang muka ang nakikita. Oo, naiintindihan natin ang panig ng isang muka na ating nakikita. Ngunit paano ang nasa likod nito na hindi natin nakikita? Maintindihan ba natin ang nakatagong muka ng barya? Tayo na namamahala sa gobyerno, dapat wala tayong pinapanigan, walang kinikilingan. Ang ating tungkulin ay panatilihing nakatayo ang barya na kumakatawan ng mga polisiya at batas ng ating bansa. Makikita ang bawat muka at maintindihan ang punto ng bawat panig. Sa aking personal na pananaw, ang Dirty Ashtray Award ay hindi opisyal na kinikilala ng World Health Organization, FCTC, or Conference of Parties. Ito ay binibigay lamang ng ilang grupo na hindi partido ng FCTC. Huwag po tayong mabahala na dahil sa award na ito, ang Pilipinas ay may papatalsik bilang signatory sa treaty ng FCTC. Ang mahalaga, ang bansa natin ay may ginawang mga batas upang i-regulate ang pangkonsumo ng sigarilyo at vapes. Ipagmalaki natin na tayo ay isa sa mga unang mga bansa na nagpatupad ng regulasyon ukol sa heated tobacco at vape products. Hinihiling ko sa bawat isa na tayo sama-samang magtulungan tayo upang makamit natin ang ating mga mithiin at hangarin sa pagbuo ng ating tatahaking landas gamit ang buong lipunan at buong gobyerno sa pamamaraan para sa ikabubuti ng ating bansa. Sa lahat na nandirito ngayon, nais kong itanong sa bawat isa sa atin, saan tayo lulugar? Papanig ba tayo sa isang banda o mananatiling nasa gitna? Maraming salamat po.
Sino tinatanong nyo? Sino tinatanong nyo?
Yung mga nandito po, Madam
Sino
Chair.
nga? Ako?
Hindi po. Ha?
Sino nga?
Yung mga attendees po natin.
Yung kasamahan mo?
Apo, mga kasama po natin sa delegation.
So, ang tanong mo is, ano exactly? Kasi baka magustuhan ko yung tanong ko, ako magtatanong para sa'yo.
Kung saan po ba, mananatili po ba tayo sa gitna?
Ano yung
O
gitna?
na balance policy lang po tayo. Wala tayong
Or-
pinapanigang.
Or, hindi, di ba sabi mo, pakiulit na lang.
Kinuhan ko. Kung mananatili po ba tayo sa gitna o maninindigan tayo o papanig sa isang side lang po.
Anong side? I want to understand your statement kaya kita tinatanong.
Well, ma'am, kinuha po kasi. Pahiram po ulit. Ito sa dulo. Nihiling ko po sa bawat isa na tayo magsama-sama, magtulungan tayo upang makamit natin ang ating mga mithiin at hangarin sa pagbuo ng ating tatahaking landas gamit ang buong lipunan at buong gobyerno sa pamamaraan para sa ikabubuti ng buong bansa. Sa lahat na nandirito ngayon, nais ko pong itanong sa bawat isa sa atin, saan tayo lulugar? Papanig ba sa iisang banda o mananatiling nasa gitna?
Ano nga ibig niyo sabihin? Anong banda? That's your statement, ma'am. So you should be able to explain it to me.
Na dun lang po tayo sa balance policy po.
Ano nga yung isang banda?
Yung sa ano po, yung kumbaga yung sa industry po, may health issues pero meron kailangan din po naman sa economic ano natin.
So ang panawagan mo ay kung tayo ay sa gitna o saan? Saan ano yung isang banda?
Magsama-sama po na magtulungan po tayo sa para sa ikabubuti ng
Hindi yan ang sinasabi mo eh. Ano yung isang banda na tinutukoy mo?
Well,
Importante yan kasi kasama ka sa delegation, nananawagan ka sa mga kasama mo. So, I'm trying to understand kung ano yung dynamics ninyo. Eh, ikaw ang NTA, so ikaw ang nananawagan. So, kung hindi ka clear sa panawagan, do you want to say something? Huwag mo na akong basahan. Sabihan mo na lang ako kung ano yung panawagan mo.
retracted na lang po. Ulitin ko na lang po yung final statement ko.
So, binabawi mo na yon.
Opo.
Hindi na yun ang panawagan mo.
Hindi na po.
Ano na yung panawagan mo?
Bilang panghuling mensahe, hinihiling ko sa bawat isa na tayo sama-samang magtulungan. Magtulungan tayo upang makamit natin ang ating mga mithiin at hangarin sa pagbuo ng ating tatahaking landas gamit ang buong lipunan at buong gobyerno sa pamamaraan para sa ikabubuti ng buong bansa.
So, wala ka ng panawagan sa
Wala
mga
na
kasama
po.
mo? Okay, sige. De, kaya ko kasi tinanong ko ano yung panawagan mo kasi yung question ko, and again, I always defer to the head of delegation. Can you tell me all of the agencies that were present are represented here today, is that correct? Except for agriculture? Tama ba? Or meron na?
Department of Agriculture was
Ah.
represented by USEC DV Sevillano in the copy 10, but I'm not sure if another DA rep is.
Here,
Oo.
yeah, I have a copy now of his letter. I'm just seeing it now. Extend my sincere regrets. I would like to assure that representatives from NTA will attend, okay, on my behalf. Okay, sige. So let's go to this, no? The representatives of the delegation. How many were you?
According to DFA, we're about 34, Madam Chair.
34.
Yes.
Do you recognize that you were the biggest delegation there? Bigger than China and Russia?
I was surprised.
You were also surprised.
Yes.
Who chose the members of the delegation, Secretary Guevara?
Madam Chair, when the delegations, well, the delegation was, the members of the delegation were already listed even before probably I came on board.
Yes.
I was ushered in as head of the delegation as early as like September. late September, Madam Chair.
So there's already,
there was already meetings being conducted, undertaken
Okay.
by the rest of the agencies
so would,
representing the
would you
delegation.
be able to tell me who, before you came on board then, who was organizing this, who was putting the group together? Because it's 34. I mean, wow. Dam time pera para magpadala that delegation. I was very patient listening to the speeches, but I'm taking a break now to just ask pointed questions because I want to know what each one did in participating there. From ang pagkaintindi ko kay Administrator Sanchez, first time niya, marami siyang natutunan. Yun ba yung reason kaya ito pupunta doon sa health conference? Kasi as far as I know, kaya I was referring to IAC NTA is because member dyan ng Department of Health, no? So Department of Health is supposed to represent you now when it comes to health concerns. So can you elaborate?
Madam Chair, no? Well, when I heard that there's a huge number of participants to attend, the first thought that came to my mind was the fact that of the importance of COP10. And that's the reason why we had to have all agencies of government involved in health, public health, including the Maybe Tobacco Association, to be participant in COP10. That's the first thought that came to my mind. I never really thought of the expense because, again, this was my first time as well to head a Philippine delegation, my first trip abroad, as after being appointed as the Senior Deputy Executive Secretary. So I thought it was a regular thing that considering that we have a whole of nation, whole of government approach, and this is how it is would come out as a delegation to the COP10. But having seen this, after seeing the members, maybe I could say that medyo exaggerated.
Medyo OA.
You could have limited the number of delegation to a simple those who maybe matter most. But I would say that the Department of Health, DILG, DepEd definitely, DTI.
Well, for the
NTA.
record, Secretary Abalos called me and he at least he told me candidly that he doesn't know anything about it. So I don't know. I'll hear from DILG later kung ano yung role niyo doon. Kasi that's his candid response to me when I said, when he received my invitation.
Pero Madam Chair, when we were drafting the Philippine statements, DILG is very critical in the chain because they deal a lot with the LGUs. No? If you want to eradicate, let's say, or stop the sale of e-cigarettes on minors, the LG will play a big part of it because we have to get the LG on board as well.
Yes, I understand. I want to go now to well, anyway, sorry, before I go to my next point. So if you were to trim this body, who would you take out?
I'd take out NTA. I'll get the details from the NTA, definitely. I mean, as part of my preparation for the COP10 or
No, because
COP11.
that nothing prevents you from meeting all of them here in the Philippines, right?
And that's what we
Wala namang
did.
problema
That's
na
what we did.
mag-usap kayo lahat dito, mag-10 meeting
Opo.
kayo, paulit-ulit kayo. Pero yung sumama pa lahat doon, at yun nga, and later on we'll hear from the advocates no on I'm sorry, Administrator Sanchez, you do not recognize the importance of the Dirty Ashtray Award, no? I'm sorry na para sa'yo, naninindigan ka na walang significance yun. Pero para sa akin, and I've represented our country many times over the last 20 years, it matters to me what other people think of our country. It matters to me that they respect our policies. It matters to me na pinapahalagahan nila yung pinaninindigan natin. So I'm sorry that you do not see the importance of that. Maybe because it's your first time. I don't know.
If I may.
Anyway, you know what?
Yes.
I will not ask you to continue answering my question, okay? More important for me is what do you think is a reasonable size delegation for future purposes?
Okay, Madam Chair. For starters, Madam Chair, when we crafted the Philippine statement, everyone was present. I mean,
Okay,
from all
and
different
that's good.
regions of government. Yes,
Okay.
that's right. So for those, because
But you
it's a
recognize it's a health conference, huh?
it is a health
You
conference, yes.
recognize it's a health conference.
And I recognize as well now, Madam Chair, that it's a debate.
And you
it's a-
recognize that this whole of government approach is a tobacco lobby. You don't have to answer that. That is my statement.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Because
Uh,
it is a tobacco lobby. For all of you who will pretend ignorance, who will feign ignorance, it is a tobacco lobby. Because none of you, I have asked you, I've asked all of you, I've given you many times to answer my question. Gumanda ba buhay ng ating mga magsasaka, ang ating tobacco farmers? Dahil sa inyong balance policy. Gumanda ba? Wala naman sumagot. Nagbigay naman ako ng chance sa inyo paulit-ulit. Tapos nakinig ako sa kahaba-habang statement ng NTA. For the record, sa lahat ng iba kong hearing, hindi ako nagpapabasa ng statement, okay? Because I expect the statements to be given to me ahead of time. I will read it before I come here, and then you will just give me highlights of your statement. But because it is my first Blue Ribbon hearing, I was giving all of you the full, your complete chance to tell me whatever you want to tell me. And I'm repeating my questions. Ang sinabi naman ni Administrator Sanchez, pasama ang kalagayan ng mga magsasaka natin. So ano ba natulong ng balance policy? Dahil dumami kayong pumunta doon, gaganda ba kalagayan ng ating magsasaka? Dahil ba na-delay ang proseso ng pag-approve ng Article 9 and 10 dahil dito sa working group, expert group? It's very technical for the ordinary citizen to understand kasi proseso ito. And I have so much respect for the DFA kasi napaka-detalyado itong mga prosesong to. Pero ang puntos lang naman ito, it is a declaration of the contents, yung laman ng ating mga produktong binibenta natin sa kabataan. Hindi sa kabataan, pero napupunta sa kamay ng kabataan. I-declare lang ang laman nito and then gawing public. Yun lang naman ang punot dulo nun. Pero humaba pa at hindi naman na-approve. Kaya nagkaroon, ma'am, for your information, kaya ho nagkaroon ng Dirty Ashtray Award kasi nako-consider po itong delaying tactic. For your information lang po. Kaya ho tayo nabibigyan and we've received it for 5 years. So favorite po tayo. 5 years na tayo nakakatanggap ng gano'n because of the tobacco lobby. Okay? So, going back to you, I withdrew my question, no? So, we have no question on the floor. So, I'll go now to your statement. In your report, Secretary Guevara, you mentioned that the Philippines enacted the Vaporized Nicotine and Non-Nicotine Products Regulation Act, which for the record, for those of you who don't know, I opposed, okay? It is a diluted law which does not fully, that does not provide all the strengths that we could have. And it, for the record, remove the protective measures that were in place under the sin tax law. Under the sin tax law, the age of access of these products is 21 years old. Dito sa vape law, naging 18. Under the sin tax law, it's FDA that has the authority to regulate these products. Nilipat po to sa DTI under this law. And third, under the sin tax law, ang flavors lang ng ating vape products is original flavor and menthol. Ngayon, lahat ng klaseng flavors with a few exceptions are available. So, I would have thought that a complete report would have included that we passed a vape law that now weakened what was a previous law. That would be a complete and comprehensive report kasi that is the truth. I am embarrassed to be part of a Congress that passed that law. But that would have been the truth. And that is what we're dealing with. So if you ask me, hindi dapat pinagmamalaki yun kasi kasama yun dun sa nababa. And dapat na-highlight na sa amin, pwede namin i-advertise sa internet ang vapes. Ba't nyo tinatago yung katotohanan? Eh, that is what you're allowing. Nasa internet na alam nyo naman, kahit 14 years old, 15 years old, pwede naman tumingin sa mga internet, meron. So that is what should have been included. If we're going to report, let's give a complete report. Wag lang yung one side. O, di ba? Kaya curious ako doon sa sinasabi mo. Ano bang side? Ano bang side gusto niyo makita? Bigay niyo yung buo. You want to tell them that we're taking care of the farmers? Tell me how we've taken care of the farmers. I want to know. I will be the first to support. But none of you can tell me. That is why we're here today. It is our job to take care of the Filipino people. Whether it's their healthcare, whether it's a private sector, that is our job. Attend kayo ng conference, ang dami nyo. O di anong na-accomplish natin? Report tayo sa Filipino people. Are you ready? Yeah. Yeah. I want to show you something. So, when DTI took the floor, sabi nyo, ano yun, again, I was trying to follow, pero sabi nyo, you have shown, ewan ko how many thousand show cause orders. O anong gagawin natin sa show cause orders na yan? Ayan, isang click, available lahat yan. Ang gagawin natin pagkatapos ng show cause order? Lahat yan available. And yung mga pinagbabawal sa batas na bawal yung mga characters, colors, yung mga anything that attracts a child, andyan din yun. Mga metallic colors, mga cute colors, fruity colors. Andyan lahat yun. Oh, so will you now support? Iban na natin ang online sales? Because if you can't control it, then tell me what we're going to do about it. This is just preliminary because what comes out of this will be referred to the proper committee. So this will most likely be referred to the Committee on Health, probably with the Committee on Trade. But I am just saying, I'm bringing this out because pagod na ako sa Committee on Health, paulit-ulit na lang to, and nobody is responsible. So now, let's make people responsible. If you can't do it, tell us, let's amend the law. Let's amend it to a way that will make your job easier. Would you like to answer?
Yes. Yes, this is a very unfortunate situation, Madam Chair. We do recognize, we try our best na may mga nababa na, meron naman po talagang mga naipasarado na rin pong site at saka yung ating mga online platforms nakipagtulungan din sa pagbaba ng sites. We hope with the Internet Transaction Act, meron pa po tayong magagawa. Pero we do recognize kung meron pa pong mas magandang enforcement law later on na magawa. I think it's something that would work better for us.
So make it part of your post-hearing task is to give us specific recommendations because these recommendations will be part of our report.
Okay po.
Kung hindi nyo nagagawa yung trabaho nyo, sabihin nyo. Kasi sa pagkakaintindi ko, those are banning online sales are part of recommendations of different bodies already. So we want to hear it from you also. Okay?
Thank you po.
Yes, Mr. Secretary.
Yeah, if I may add to that, no, hindi ko lang pa lang kami nakakapag-meet, no. In fact, again, before I left, we were supposed to have a post-evaluation of our COP10 experience. And part of that will be the report that will be sent to Congress and including to the Office of the President, particularly recommendations as well on our take of COP10 and how can we move forward, considering as you mentioned, our legislation acts certain items that are present in the FCTC, including the guidelines that was crafted during the COP10, Madam Chair. That's why hindi ho pa kami tapos sa trabaho namin. Meron pa ho kami isang meeting para pag-usapan yung report na kina-craft na po ng DFA plus yung recommendations po na mga galing sa iba't ibang ahensya ng gobyerno. Nakasapi po dun sa aming delegation. Salamat po.
Thank you. And what I'd like to get out of that, Secretary, is what are your learnings there? No? Kasi ayoko lang nung defensive tayo. I mean, I've also been in a situation where I am critiqued for my work. So if I'm critiqued, I try to be as open-minded and to see kung ano ba yung value ng critique na yun, may mai-improve ba ako. So I would expect na kayong government officials, I'm assuming using government funds, would be open-minded, Administrator Sanchez, di ba? Hindi tayo dapat balit sibuyas kasi we're public officials. So we need to be able to be mature enough to accept na bakit tayo na-critique, ano ba yung nagawa namin na nakatawag ng pansin sa kanila. Diba? So I understand, may explanation ka kung ano yung doon sa statement nyo, Secretary, kung ano yung process na pinagdaanan nyo, ba't ganun yung statements nyo. But I'm also saying na because of those steps that you took, it delayed. And because FCTC, this is COP10, diba? So 10 meeting na nga. They consider it delaying tactics kasi. I'm telling you as blunt as it is. It's considered delaying tactics because ika-10 taon na alam nilang ginagawa ng mga countries that are known to have the support or to be willing to work with the tobacco lobbies, na ganun yung ginagawang tactic. So yun lang naman ang sa akin. If maninindigan tayo na hindi tayo nagpapasway sa tobacco lobby, then by all means, and that's why I allowed you to make your statement, by all means, make sure that hindi kayo napupunta dun sa direction na yun because that is how it appears. And it is a great embarrassment to me. I direct my to DFA kasi sila naman usually ang humaharap sa atin no, on behalf of others. Like you said, it's your first time. And the Philippines is very well respected in international communities, very well respected. Kaya nasasaktan ako na magkaroon tayo ng ganitong impression. Okay? Anyway, let's go on. Yun nga, Department of Agriculture, USEC DV Savellano, who is not present today, was present in he was part of the delegation,
Yes,
correct?
Madam Chair.
Representing DA.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. Ano role niya as USEC for livestock? Ano kilalaman ng USEC for livestock dito sa WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control? May effect ba ang tobacco sa livestock?
Madam Chair, as head of the delegation, that's also my question. But my understanding is the way government works, hindi ibig sabihin na you are a USEC for, let's say, livestock, you are not tasked to do other rules, no?
So ano
I have
kaya
to be
yung
stand
role
corrected.
niya?
I think yung role rin niya is kasama sa portfolio niya yung tobacco NTA, sir, Madam Chair. But let me just direct it to NTA,
Oo.
whether that's
Well,
correct.
kasi
no?
yun din ang sa akin, if NTA could represent him now in a blue ribbon hearing, di siguro NTA could also represent him there, di ba? Save pa tayo ng taxpayers' money. Again, I have nothing against conferences. I'm just saying I want to know what is the role of everybody who participated in those conferences. I will assume good faith. But make sure sa susunod, alam niyo kung ano yung role ng bawat isa. Otherwise, just participate in the meetings here. And use the funding to better the lives of the Filipino farmers, which is what you keep on saying. Okay. In the interest of time, from the agencies, no, ang kailangan ko pantawagin is DILG. As Secretary said, very important ang role nyo. So, can you give a brief statement on your participation in all this?
Good morning, Madam Chair. In the Panama Convention, the Philippine delegation affirmed the commitment of the country to the WHO FCTC, for which reason we highlighted our national laws pursuant to that commitment, the RA 9211 and the RA 11900. Since 2004, the department has been active in promoting the general welfare of the public and the people's right to health, for which reason the DILG, in its continuous effort to encourage all LGUs to ensure implementation of the national legislation to regulate tobacco usage, we issued several memorandum circulars. In 2004, the LG issued Memorandum Circular 004085, implementation of the smoking ban in public places. In 2004 also, the LG issued MC 200486, Youth Smoking Prevention, through the implementation of YSP provisions of Tobacco Regulatory Act of 23. In 2007, the LG issued 2007-126, Advisory on the Implementation of Section 22 of RA 9211, otherwise known as Tobacco Regulation Act. In 2011, the LG issued and in 2011, 2017, the LG issued MC 2017-90 and joining LGUs to support Executive Order number 26, titled Providing for the Establishment of Smoke-Free Environment in Public and Enclosed Places. Also in 2017, the LG issued 2017-147 and joining provinces, cities, municipalities to support Executive Order number 26, titled Providing for the Establishment of Smoke-Free Environment in Public and Enclosed Places. As of now, Madam Chair, our data shows that 930 LGUs have already enacted ordinances within their jurisdiction with regards to this smoke regulation of our tobacco usage, Madam Chair. That's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I was listening even though I had to confer with our Director General, no, your list of issuances to support the laws that we had enacted. But again, my point is, as I'm listening to you, maraming salamat dun sa support na binigay nyo dahil napaka mahalaga nyo talaga dito sa ating campaign against smoking and the use of vapes, especially among the youth. Kailangan ba pa after all the work that you've done, sumama pa kayong lahat doon, and you have 3 in your delegation who went?
Your Honor, Madam Chair, we are only 2. Me and my technical staff.
Okay.
Because in the previous COP, the LG was already in attendance. That's why we also attended.
Sinunod nyo rin, yes. I do not attribute malice, okay? I'm just trying to raise this this reality that we were the biggest delegation. I will repeat, bigger than China and Russia. And so it's up to you to determine what would be a reasonable amount to spend. We are just here to check, to be sure, and to bring to your attention kung nakikita namin na baka naman pwedeng mabawas-bawasan ng dami ng attendees, pwede tayong makafocus kung ano yung trabaho at hand, recognizing that this is a health conference. Okay, anyway, thank you. PLLO, ASEC Rose, Inigo.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to my
Just
colleagues.
for your information, I read a number of, thank you for you gave us a lot of documents. So I've gone through all of them, I think, very detailed.
Yes.
So I personally think I know what you're going to say, but just for the record,
Yes.
go ahead.
Madam Chair, the COP10 was brought to our attention by some lawmakers from the Northern Luzon Alliance Group. They requested PLLO to attend, participate, and facilitate dialogue among concerned agencies. Our participation during the COP10 was merely to assist the Philippine delegation with matters pertaining to legislation, RA 11900 and RA 9211 in particular. And as government officials representing the Philippines in the COP10, we are duty-bound to uphold the rule of law and defend our state policies which were enacted by both houses, Senate and the House of Representatives. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we're done with the agencies. Let's now go to SIATCA. This is the Southeast Asia Tobacco Control Alliance. The Executive Director is with us, Dr. Yul Doroteo. You have the floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to everyone present, our distinguished delegates in government, and also our civil society representatives present today.
Sorry, before you proceed.
Yes, ma'am.
Were you present there?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you part of the Philippine delegation or you go on your own?
No, ma'am. The Southeast Asia
SIATCA?
Tobacco Control Alliance is an accredited observer,
There you
NGO
go.
observer to the Conference of the Parties.
Okay.
So we
Okay.
have been an accredited observer for the past 2 or 3 COPs already.
Okay.
We are also a member of the Global Alliance for Tobacco Control, among the over 100.
Okay, because before
NGOs.
you proceed, I just want to understand who are the other Filipino parties that were present there. So of course you represent SIATCA, and then Action for Health. Were you present? Not present. Does the Philippine delegation include NGOs?
No, Madam Chair.
Is that something that can be considered, given that you have agencies that are looking after the welfare of the Filipino? Isn't that some of our NGOs are well known and have track records of doing the same? Is that something that can be considered? I'm just posing a question.
I don't see any reason why not, Madam Chair, but my understanding is that the Philippine delegation composed of representatives of those in government.
Government.
Yes,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
And is that the official parang what I read is the protocol is the delegation can bring whoever they want. Tama ba? Yeah, ang understanding ko, I don't recall that it said government officials only.
Pardon me, I'm not ready with that answer right
O,
now.
sige, check
can,
nyo for
yes.
future reference.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm just curious, and don't worry, I'm not planning to say 34 pa rin, pero kalahati. Hindi naman yun yung objective ko. I'm just opening this discussion to all possibilities. Okay, Dr. Yul, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we were present as an accredited observer to the Conference of Parties together with other NGOs. So Health Justice, represented by Mr. Ralph de Gulacion, was also there. And in our capacity as an NGO observer, we look at how parties, governments, not just the Philippines, but others in our region and throughout the world, participate. Do they intervene on behalf of public health so that the objective of the FCTC is achieved in the quickest possible time? Or are the interventions helping to promote tobacco industry interests? I'm not specifically authorized to speak on behalf of the Global Alliance for Tobacco Control, although we are a member of the alliance. It was previously known as the Framework Convention Alliance and has been around since the negotiations of the treaty, since 2000. So over the past 24 years, although incorporated in 2004. The Orchid and Ashtray Awards have been given even prior to the adoption of the treaty. That means during the negotiations from 2000 to 2003, these awards were given on a daily basis to parties, whether they did or did not do their job as we thought they should be doing. Specifically, that is either do they promote public health or the tobacco industry interests? Do they undermine the FCTC, what is already established under the treaty, or do they disrupt proceedings? And for example, I'll go back to COP9. Guatemala was given a dirty ashtray. So I'm specifically not choosing the Philippines. Guatemala was given a dirty ashtray because it repeatedly asked about quorum, called for points of order, checked whether the online, because it was a virtual event, whether the online preparations were actually legal. So the legal officer had to explain all of this, and that took up a lot of time. And therefore, they were awarded a dirty ashtray for that. So similarly, at COP10, the Philippines, on the first day, when the agenda was being proposed, together with other parties, wanted to combine agenda items. And there was a long debate on this, and that also led to a delay in the adoption of the agenda. So that's one of the examples I will cite. With regard to Articles 9 and 10, it took 3.5 days before the COP eventually decided to defer the discussion to COP 11. That is an unusually long time because the COP is only meeting for 5 days. And so, as we heard from the head of the delegation, there was an attempt to arrive at a compromise. But at the end of 3.5 days, that did not happen. And the compromise proposed, in our view, was not really that helpful. Because, first of all, the proposal was to have a working group and an expert group concurrently functioning, and the expert group would report or be accountable to the working group. So for those who are not familiar, the expert group is composed of individuals who have expertise on the particular issue at hand, while the working group is composed of parties to the FCTC, that means governments. And the working groups normally develop guidelines to help implement the treaty obligations. So the expert group looks at evidence, what is available in terms of research, what is available in terms of country experiences, and then provides a report to the Conference of Parties. Both the working group and the expert group are accountable to the Conference of Parties. The expert group cannot be accountable to the working group. And this was explained by the legal officer of the Convention Secretariat. So for that reason alone, the compromise proposal was not really viable.
Even I'm trying to be sure I follow this correctly. It was the proposal of the Philippines to have both an expert group and a working group, and for the expert group to report to the working group. And that has never happened before. You're nodding your head because that is the proposal, correct? And then my question is, that has never happened before.
No, that has not.
That there's an expert group that will report to a working group.
No, ma'am. Usually there is either only an expert group or only a working group.
Okay.
Yeah. So at the end of the 3.5 days, as mentioned, the chair of the committee came back and said, how are we moving forward? There was actually a fourth proposal, another compromise proposal proposed by another party, whereby the expert group would function between COP 10 and 11, report back to the COP at COP 11, and then the working group would take that report and then continue its mandate. So it would be possible to reactivate the working group, but have it function at a later time after the expert group had completed its work. However, this did not seem to be an acceptable compromise, I think, to the Philippines or to other parties. So in the end, majority of parties still wanted to have only an expert group, a minority wanted to only have the working group, and the Philippines was left alone with its compromise proposal. And that's why the agenda item was deferred to COP 11 based on the rules of procedure. I have, in our position paper to this committee, Madam Chair, we emphasized that the FCTC is a health treaty. It is in the name, the World Health Organization Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. And so if the Philippine government is sincere in its commitment to public health and tobacco control, and to fulfilling its obligations under the treaty, the delegation to the Conference of Parties must be headed by the Department of Health, and its positions must clearly promote public health interests.
If I may interrupt you, I have this information. Out of the 162 countries that participated, 115 had health representatives as their head of delegation, for the information of the body. Go ahead.
I would also like to point out that Article 5.3 of the FCTC is a general obligation. So this general obligation requires that parties protect their tobacco control policies from the commercial and vested interests of the tobacco industry. So further, the Article 5.3 implementation guidelines, which were adopted by the Conference of Parties in 2008, these recognize that there is a fundamental and irreconcilable conflict between the tobacco industry interests and public health policy interests. There is no way to mix the two and have a balanced policy that will favor public health. So this is a hard lesson I think we should have learned from COVID-19 pandemic. Health authorities were sidelined in favor of economic interests in many countries to the detriment of public health. In our position paper, we make several recommendations as to policies that might be enacted by Congress to further the implementation of the FCTC. But I would just like to summarize with a few points, Madam Chair. Let me mention that the FCTC is actually law of the land in the Philippines. This is recognized by the Supreme Court itself. This is in the case of the Philippine Tobacco Institute versus the FDA regarding RA 9711, the FDA Act. And the Supreme Court recognized that the FCTC, having been ratified by the Senate, is law of the land and should be treated as such. From our distinguished delegates in government, I did not hear that. I heard them mention multiple times RA 9211, RA 11900, and occasionally the sin tax law. But they never mentioned the FCTC as law of the land. It is law of the land. I would also like to say that RA 9211 was enacted in 2003 before the FCTC was ratified. And therefore, RA 9211, if we examine it and cross-check it with the FCTC, we see that the RA 9211 is not fully compliant with the FCTC. And therefore, it should be the task of Congress to align RA 9211 with the FCTC, particularly because the FCTC is mentioned in the SDGs as a means to achieve sustainable development, particularly SDG 3, health for all. And finally, Madam Chair, the FCTC in its entirety is a balanced policy. It is comprehensive, it is evidence-based, and it looks after the welfare of farmers. Article 17 of the treaty talks about the obligation of governments to find economically viable alternative livelihoods for farmers and workers. In addition to taxes, smoke-free environments, graphic health warnings, a ban on all tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship, and Article 5.3, not just attacking illicit trade and protecting minors. That is a minor part, well, not minor, but it is a small part of an entire comprehensive approach to tobacco control, which is the FCTC. And in fact, our sin tax law earmarks revenues for alternative livelihoods for farmers. I would be very curious to know what our government has done with that revenue to help uplift the lives of our tobacco farmers. Because, Madam Chair, tobacco control advocates like us, we are not the enemy of tobacco farmers. I have visited tobacco farmers. I've seen how poor they are. And if only our government implemented tobacco control properly, including alternative livelihoods for farmers, our farmers would be faring much better today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, just a brief intervention
Yes.
material. The citation made by Dr. Yule on the report for sin tax for tobacco farmers from Department of Finance data, and this was presented at a side event during COP10, around 1.85 billion, mga humigit kumulang 2 bilyong dolyares o kaya 140 bilyong piso ang nanggaling sa koleksyon mula sa sin tax noong 2023, at ito po ay para sa ating mga tobacco farmers. At nasa mandato po, nasa alam po ng NTA ito, nakasama sa mandato nila ayon sa Section 33 ng RA 9211 to promote Tobacco Growers Cooperative Program to assist tobacco farmers in developing alternative farming systems, plant alternative crops, and other livelihood projects. Thank you, Madam Chair.
To ask you to, or actually just submit it. Ano ba yung mga alternative livelihood and support systems na mandate ng batas na dapat yung ma-deliver? Pakisulat na lang sa atin sa committee yan. Thank you, Secretary.
Maraming salamat, Madam Chair. No? Just let me also add on, this is the Philippine statement. Oh. Well, at least part of the Philippine statement I delivered in COP10. No? On the share of the funding that we derive from the excise tax. The Philippines is also pleased to share that funding for essential government services, including the majority of universal health care and COVID-19 recovery initiatives, among others, as well as infrastructure projects, such as farm-to-market roads, schools, hospitals, and rural health facilities are sourced from excise taxes on tobacco and vapor products, which in 2022 amounted to almost $3 billion. in adherence to the FCTC Article 6, since enacting the relevant law in 2012, the Philippines has consistently increased excise tax rates on cigarettes and tobacco products, making cigarettes less affordable and consequently decreasing consumption, Madam Chair. This is also a statement that was delivered in COP10, Madam Chair. But as a short response, Madam Chair, to Siatco, not to debate with Siatco, because I see also the importance of the NGO in events like this, Madam Chair. First of all, we never blocked consensus. Siatco will agree, will confirm this, that the parties present are required or encouraged to arrive at a consensus. If consensus is not met, the next step would be to go to voting. For an item to be carried or to be approved, the winning vote should garner 3/4 of the parties present in the event itself. Our task then was really to ensure consensus. And that's the reason why we proposed a third option. And as mentioned by Siatco, there was a fourth option that was proposed. So are we to be accused of delaying, or in which we are always in favor of a way forward? And in fact, as mentioned by Siatco, in 6.1 and 6.3, we agreed to what the rest of the parties wanted. We never blocked consensus. We consented actually to the merger of 6.1, to the deliberation of 6.1 and 6.3 sequentially. And this can be confirmed by Siatco. We never blocked consensus. Even in the last day of the event, Madam Chair, last day where Article 6.2 was discussed, we never blocked consensus. And this is the reason why we were surprised why we were awarded a dirty ashtray. Maybe because of the demeanor, maybe because of all other countries similarly situated would go to us and help them articulate, because they could not articulate properly in the English language, the position that we have taken as well. In any case, as I've said, and this delegates of the Philippine delegation will confirm this, I will own this dirty ashtray award. Maski na nung COP9, nakatatlong dirty award ang Pilipinas, tayo isa lang, but one is too many. Also for me, Madam Chair. Kung pwede lang sana, babawin ko, iniisip ko, ba't kami nakakuha ng dirty award? Dahil lahat ng mga binanggit ko ay very carefully worded. I chose my words. I never even mentioned harm reduction. Siatco and some delegates will say, "Oy, you mentioned harm reduction," because I read it in the article. The statement confirmed that there was a harm reduction. But even the DOH would confirm this, Madam Chair, that I never mentioned harm reduction in my statement. While it was in the statement, I intentionally never mentioned it because I was very careful in what I delivered in COP10, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Madam Chair, the DOH confirms that the prepared statement was different and the SDS was very selective in reading.
I was not able to call DepEd. So let me call on Dr. Dexter Galban, ASEC for Operations.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. As the agency that caters to the demographic that is significantly affected by the presence of tobacco products and vapes, the Department of Education strongly reiterates that when it comes to opportunities to discuss and decide national directions on matters related to the promotion of health and well-being and to the protection of children and youth, DepEd has always taken and will always take a position that advocates the maximum safeguarding of the interest of its learners, leaving no room for compromise in their holistic development, safety, and well-being, while adhering to measures provided by law. And the stance of DepEd is aligned with our mandate to provide for the establishment and maintenance of a complete, adequate, and integrated system of basic education relevant to the goals of national development. It is also aligned with our administration's commitment to take good care of learners by promoting learner well-being, inclusive education, and a positive learning environment as part of the Matatag agenda, our direction in resolving basic education challenges. And in this light, particularly in COP10, DepEd took advantage of opportunities at the global stage to the COP and the WHO FCTC to voice out the needs of children and youth while seeking both national and international commitments that will ensure maximum benefit for the Filipino learners, as expressed during the participation of the agency's representatives, both in the delegation and in all the preparatory workshops leading to the conference. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that. Our next speaker is Health Justice Philippines, Mr. Ralph Emerson Tegulacion, Executive Director.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair. Health Justice, is it okay to read just a portion of our statement, Madam Chair? We support the stand on the need to protect our people, especially the youth, from the harms of tobacco products that the Department of Health and the Department of Education expressed in the last two conference of parties to the FCTC. We agree with the call of the former senior officials of the DOH and DepEd. They had a statement, public statement, on the need for the Philippine delegation to take a stand protecting our youth from the dangers of tobacco products. Unfortunately, based on our observation during the COP10, the position of the DOH, DepEd, and the call of the former senior officials of both agencies were not reflected in the position statements of the Philippine delegation in the recently concluded COP10 in Panama. For health justice, our recommendation for the Blue Ribbon Committee and the Senate to adopt are some of these remedial measures. Number one is the designation of the DOH as the permanent head of the Philippine delegation to future FCTC COP sessions, and the exclusion of those who promote tobacco interests in the delegation to advance and protect the right to health of Filipinos. And finally, in line with our commitments to the FCTC, we recommend a comprehensive review of laws and policies on tobacco products and other emerging nicotine products and amendments to be done to better protect the general population, particularly the youth. Thank you, Madam Chair.
While we're waiting for DOH, mukhang wala pa sila, no? But let me call on Dr. Maricar Limpin, Executive Director of Action on Health and Smoking. Is it smoking? Ash. Okay. Well, we've worn many hats, so I wasn't sure which hat you were wearing now. Ash. Okay. Statement, Dr. Limpin.
Yeah. Thank you, and allow me to greet everyone. Good afternoon. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, to all fellow government and public servants, as well as members of the civil society. So good morning. And allow me, Madam Chair, to give you our appreciation for your very swift action on this particular matter. I'd just like to, we have submitted already our position statement, but I'd like to point out some few points, Madam Chair. So number one, I think from the actions of the Philippine delegation to the COP10, definitely our proposal to reactivate the working group and at the same time establish an expert group, although this would seem to our to the head of our delegation to be a compromise, the Philippine delegation apparently ignored also the issue raised by the FCTC Secretariat themselves, that this proposal actually presents financial and technical constraints to the body. And on that point, maybe our delegation could have strongly considered to maybe consenting to the creation of the expert group, which is actually the proposal of majority of the parties. And then on tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorships, wherein the discussion focused on the depiction of tobacco in the entertainment media, as reported by the working group, the Philippine delegation pushed for the phrases ban or restriction, and also would like to include the phrase in accordance with national law in the proposal of the TAPS guidelines. Now, this proposal actually basically ignored the Article 13 of the FCTC that calls for a comprehensive ban. And therefore, the proposal that our delegation made is actually a weakening of the draft guidelines. And thus, you will probably understand that in a health treaty, this definitely will cause a delay in the discussion with regards to the said articles. And then I'd like to probably also point out, thirdly, the point that when the Philippine delegation flaunted the country's vape law as a landmark legislation, as probably said already by our distinguished chair, this legislation is really, well, it's a legislation that probably one of the first few legislations that addressed the electronic smoking devices, but it is still a watered down legislation coming from the syntax reform law, wherein there were a number of provisions that were really watered down, and therefore this is probably not something that we can truly be proud of. And then let it also be known that the decline in the smoking rates in the country is not from this type of legislation. In fact, the main driver for the drop in the smoking prevalence was because of the syntax reform law, which were implemented starting in 2013. So, Madam Chair, from the point of view of the civil society organizations, and when I say civil society organizations, it does not pertain only to civil society organizations in the country, but globally. So these kind of proposals from the Philippine delegation actually mirror the position and the behavior of countries that were heavily influenced by the tobacco industry. So this is actually just to give light as to why we received the Dirty Ashtray Award, because it appeared that the position and our behavior is the same position and behavior that is being seen among parties that were influenced by the tobacco lobby. So, and in this type of situations, this is also the same reason why in the previous conference on parties, the Philippines also received the notorious Dirty Ashtray Award. Precisely because they are saying that our delegation seemed to brazenly use tobacco industry tactics of obstinate dispute and delay throughout the conference on parties. Second point, Madam Chair, I'd like to again highlight that the WHO FCTC is a global health treaty. It was initiated under the auspices of the World Health Assembly, ratified by 183 parties, including the Philippines, and the basic purpose is to address global tobacco epidemic and uphold the right of the people to the highest standards of health. This treaty focused
on evidence-based and best practice tobacco control measures to reduce tobacco epidemic, including the now rising use of electronic smoking devices. So therefore, for the government, we need to really show to the international committee, to the international community, our commitment to public health and tobacco control, and our commitment to fulfill our obligations under the WHO FCTC. And therefore, we actually expect, Madam Chair, that for the delegation of our country to any conference on parties regarding the FCTC, premium must be put over health, over economic issues. So on this note, Madam Chair, I'd like to probably raise some recommendations, if I may be allowed. Number one, the WHO FCTC being a global treaty, we propose that the head of the delegation should be the Department of Health, and that the delegation must keep in mind that their attendance to the COPE is all about health. And hopefully, if there will be any member of the delegation, it should be that they are there to be able for they will be there so that our country will be able to fulfill our obligations under the FCTC. So to our head of the delegation, sir, maybe like, let us say, for the Department of Agriculture, if any representative of the Department of Agriculture will be there, it is actually to think of a strategy wherein we will be able to help our tobacco farmers on the event that, as our NTA has been saying, there is a reduction in the production of tobacco, then I think we need already to think of a strategy wherein we will be able to help the tobacco farmers in the event that they will be displaced from tobacco farming. So find a way wherein we will be able to give them an alternative livelihood, which is actually also stated in our national law, the RA 9211. So on that note as well, I'd like to ask our people from the DA and also from the NTA, what were the things done? What were the programs that you have done in order to help alleviate the plight of our tobacco farmers? Because that is actually your task under RA 9211. And then, Madam Chair, I'd like also to propose that probably we need to adopt transparent policies, including disclosure of any potential conflict of interest within the delegation. The lack of transparency not only undermines the democratic principles that guide our governance, but it also perpetuates a concerning pattern of prioritizing commercial interest over the well-being of our citizens. I'd like also to add, actually, I have been, as Madam Chair have already said, I wear many hats. I am not just representing civil society organization. I am also, as I have said, your fellow public servant. I work as a doctor in the Philippine Heart Center, a specialty center under the Department of Health. I was part of the Philippine delegation during the Conference on Parties 7 in India. I was also included in the list of the Philippine delegation for COP 8, 9, and 10. But my name have always been excluded as part of the delegation. Probably I'd like to ask our DFA, since this is already a very good opportunity, why I was always excluded. I have never done anything that the country can be ashamed during the COP7. So I keep on wondering why I was excluded, why the DFA did not see me fit to be part of the Philippine delegation. Probably that is one question that I'd probably want the DFA to answer. And then lastly, Madam.
Just for proper decorum, ma'am, the questions are addressed to me, no?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it's okay that you have those questions, but it should be addressed to me. Thank you. Go ahead, please. Wrap up.
Yes, Madam Chair, we also would like to insist on a paradigm shift towards a more inclusive decision-making process by actively seeking public input on decisions that have a profound impact on public health and engaging experts and civil society. Lastly, Your Honor, we emphasize the urgent need for the Philippines to rectify its standing on the global stage regarding the tobacco control. We implore our government to uphold its commitment to public health, act transparently in international forums, and actively collaborate with the global community to combat the tobacco epidemic. So thank you, Madam Chair.
I was listening intently as I was to all of your statements, and I think Secretary, what is important is something that Dr. Limpin said helps me make clear my concerns. No, when you have a delegation that includes the tobacco sector representatives, for so long as their interest is the tobacco farmers, then they have a role to play, exactly as Dr. Limpin pointed out. But when they are there in the guise of, I don't know what, no? I don't know if they're pretending to be part of the health sector or this balanced approach, this one nation approach, in that guise of that phrase, it muddles the purpose for why we are participating in this conference. And then, because the question raised by some of you is, you expressed dismay or confusion as to why the delegation received the Dirty Ashtray Award. You received it for the following reasons nga. So you have members in the delegation who are representing the tobacco interest, pero hindi nyo naman dinediretso na ang concern lang namin are the tobacco farmers at ito yung we want to hear from the other countries. You are now questioning or posing objections or concerns on Article 9 and 10. And Article 9 and 10 is about testing the emissions, monitoring, declaring what are the harmful products. So how does that look to the public? Sasabihin nyo, para yan sa farmers, pero kine-question nyo yung karapatan ng bawat Pilipino, ng bawat magulang na alamin kung anong laman ng produktong yon? Hindi naman ang farmers ang nakikinabang doon. So show me a statement that was made directly for the farmers and I will be the first one to defend you na you will not get that Dirty Ashtray Award. Pero kung yung intervention nyo is about the right of the Filipinos to know what is in that product, tapos yung obligation na i-publish yung laman na yon, parang why would you attend that conference na yun yung pinaglalaban nyo? Yun yung details na inabalan nyo. So I go now directly to DTI because by law, against my objection, but it is the law and I have no choice but to follow that law, you are duty bound to, and let me just pull out the right, okay. So RA 11900 on the vape law basically says that DTI in consultation with FDA shall set technical standards for safety, consistency, and quality of the products. Let me now refer to Article 9. Article 9 of FCTC is the testing and measuring of the contents and emission of the tobacco product. So, hindi naman siguro nagkakalayo yun, di ba? Kasi DTI, paano mo gagawin tong trabaho mo to set technical standards for safety, consistency, and quality kung hindi mo alam ang content at ang sukat ng mga produktong yon? Agree naman, di ba? Common sense naman, Secretary, am I making sense? I just want to be sure I'm logical. Dr. Yul, Dr. Limpin, di ako doktor pero inaano ko lang kung Mr. Emerson. So ang sabi lang naman sa FCTC, magkasundo tayo para magkaroon tayo ng testing and measuring of the content and emissions of the tobacco product and the regulations of that. For me, that's just another way of saying what we have already in our law, that you set the technical standards for safety, consistency, and quality of the products unless ang balak ba natin sabihin is gusto natin mas mababa ang standards natin for safety, consistency, and testing? No naman. Let the record show that Yusek Sanchez is vigorously shaking her head, and I'm happy to know that it appears, and I'll give you the floor now, that I would assume that you want to have a high standard. So can you update us? Because during the budget hearing, what we got out of DTI is that they are still awaiting equipment, purchasing equipment. Okay, this is 2023. But for the record, because Attorney Guevara, you were not head of delegation then and not even involved in all of this then. All of you who are new, in ano bang last term ni President Duterte, last budget, 2021? Kasi 2021 for the 2022 budget, Secretary Mon Lopez told me na meron ng equipment. Tapos nung bagong administration, binibili pa lang yung equipment. So, naglolokohan tayo. Because sabi ko, I stood by what the experts tell me that it is very technical, and I now defer to Dr. Sakate. Why don't you jump in this discussion? When we had that budget hearing, you were also not yet the FDA director. So I'm just relaying the information to all of you. I had asked, bakit nasa mandate ba ng DTI ang health? May capability ba ang DTI? And that's why the best I could do in the compromise of this bill is that DTI in consultation with FDA. Kasi si FDA naman ang alam kung may alam dyan. So may I know from the two of you, are you working together? Who is setting the standard? And are you happy with the standard that we have? Yes, you may answer.
If I may, ma'am, Madam Chair, I asked my technical staff about the consultation that the DTI has been establishing with the FDA, and he said that we had a meeting last January 30. This is with regards to the capacitation of their lab on how to establish the testing, regarding their testing capacity. Another one will be set tomorrow. There will be another meeting to how to establish their laboratories, ma'am. Yeah, that's all for that.
Okay, sige. Can I hear from DTI? Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. When it comes, we definitely defer to the FDA when it comes to the content of these things. But in terms of the machine, the equipment for devices, that's what we are working. I know there are several devices that we're learning more and more because of the registration, voluntary registration that we're initiating now. So it is true that they've cut this out of our budget, the other equipment that you mentioned, but there is an existing from the advice from the Bureau of Product Standards that already initiating work on the, so that we'll be ready to do the mandatory monitoring and enforcement following the certification in June this year. Although right now we're just on registration. But sorry, Madam Chair, if I may just address the previous concern that you mentioned. As we expressed earlier, we fully support the implementation of Article 9 and 10. It was we are one with the Philippine delegation in terms of just the process on how the guidelines will be presented. But in the Philippines, we hope to be able to implement the standards that we would like to set for these vape products, even in the absence of the at the moment of that guidelines.
Here, what you're saying is, in the absence of guidelines from the FCTC, you are prepared. So can you submit that to us? Can you just work together para hindi na ako magka-counter check nung sabi mo, can you submit something jointly? Yes, Dr. Sakate.
Again, in addition to that, according to my technical staff, with regards to the testing of the devices, it's already been established. So yun po yung kinoconsult nila sa amin on how to establish that the devices. But yung mga juices
But
po
that's
kasi,
okay. To be very clear ha, devices, yung palang yung lalagyan, okay? And in the past hearings, I don't know how many of you were with DTI and FDA and DOH at the time I was handling the budget discussions on this. There were initial discussions between FDA and DTI that DTI would handle the device, but FDA would handle the liquid. So where are you now with that?
with regard to that, ma'am, unfortunately, because we have been limited by the law. So basically, about the juices po, that's the main reason why the FCTC and the CAF-10 was is established, so that the how to regulate or the testing of the juices will be established po. So,
Sandali. So are you telling me that without the FCTC guidelines, hindi ka pwedeng mag-initiate ng testing mo?
meron-
Wala kang sariling standards?
Madam Chair, meron po, according to my technical staff, that there are certain testing na po na established, pero yung full review po is yet to be determined pa. So may mga part and
So
parcel pa rin po.
na-accomplish yung goal ng vaping and tobacco industry na delay. Kasi kung aantay mo pa yon, di wala tayong testing. So tuloy ang ligaya. Benta ng ibenta yung mga produkto yan sa mga bata na hindi natin alam kung ano nakakalason. Is that what you're saying?
Basically, ma'am, yeah, there are segments
Okay,
or there.
basically, yes.
Yes,
That is
yes,
what
yes,
he
yes.
said.
I don't want to.
Mr. Secretary, is that acceptable to you that that is the outcome of your delegation's trip to this convention?
Thank you very much again for this opportunity to clarify things, Madam Chair. No? Of course, as I mentioned earlier, there's a recommendation for the group to meet next week and to come up with the report and the recommendations. So obviously, hindi ho yan ang recommendation namin. Ang recommendation namin is to ensure na hindi tayo makapagbenta ng e-cigarettes sa mga minors, as in pursuant likewise to RA 11900. If there's a need to amend, then definitely we will support that, Madam Chair. On another item,
Secretary, that I'm pretty sure you didn't miss, but I need to hear it from you, is that yung binebenta naman sa adults, consenting adults, ano laman nun? Alam ba nila? Nare-regulate ba natin?
hindi po natin nare-regulate yun. Kaya kailangan natin ng expert advice o expert group to make sure na kung ano ang laman nun, ma-disclose sa government at ma-disclose sa publiko. I agree with that, Madam Chair. Let me just digress a bit, Madam Chair, on the procedure, what happened no, dun sa discussions on Article 9 and Article 10. Maybe siguro if it were me, Madam Chair, I would invite si Dr. Limpin to be part of the group.
Thank you. She's very happy. 10 taon na siya nag-iintay na maimbita siya.
Hindi, para lang malinaw, Madam Chair.
Thank
Kasi
you.
medyo nagkakalimutan siguro, Madam Chair. No? Those who were present would attest to this one. There were two committees, and Siadka will confirm this as well. There were two committees created. Committee A to discuss certain agenda, and Committee B to discuss agenda on budget, international cooperation, etc. So most of the time, I was in Committee A until there was a point in which 6.2, which was supposed to be discussed in Committee A, was transferred to Committee B. So ma'am, naglagari po ako, medyo malaki malawak yung
Yeah,
convention center. So I like,
understand.
when I arrived in the Committee B, and this can be confirmed by Siatka again, there was already a move of the chair to create a working group to draft the guidelines. Kasi hindi ko magka-agree ang mga partido present during the time. I don't want to name the names of the contracting parties or the parties present then, but there was already a disagreement when I arrived. So the committee chair of Committee B said, oh, let's create a drafting group to draft the guidelines. So since we have interest as well, I was not talking at that point in time. I said, okay, to the group, let's join the drafting group. And that's what happened. We labored to draft the guidelines on taps, advertisements, promotions, sponsorships for how many hours? Hanggang gabi, 4 hours, more than 4 hours. And awa ng Diyos, we were able to come up with the draft guidelines with EU, with China, with Japan, and with other countries present. And in fact, ang nag-aaway nun, Madam Chair, hindi po tayo kasama doon. Ang medyo nag-aalita lang doon as the EU and China, because China does not want to put, China wants to put restrict, EU doesn't want to put restrict. Why is this important to be disclosed here? Because FCTC guideline, FCTC acknowledges two types of classification. Countries, 13.2, countries that can do a comprehensive ban. 13.3, countries that cannot do a comprehensive ban but should do some sort of restriction or regulation. Actually, the word restrict was the one used. So dalawang classification. So these two classifications are very vitally important in the discussion of the guidelines. EU didn't want to put restrict, China wanted to put restrict. And we were caught in the middle. And we were asked, Madam Chair, by the chair of the committee to talk to China and see if there's a common ground. Again, consensus. Siatka was present at that point in time. And I said, okay, we'll help. That's why nung gabi, natapos ho kami, ang wording draft guidelines is comprehensive ban or restrict in recognition of 13.2 and 13.3. So we never, Madam Chair, initiated any proposal. We were just there to help the parties and ourselves come up with the draft guidelines. Ang nangyari po dito, nung pinesenta po namin the following day sa body yung draft guidelines, nagreklamo po ang isang country. Ang gusto niya, walang restrict. Ang gusto niya, comprehensive ban. So paano naman yung mga bansa na hindi pwede mag-comprehensive ban? Bawal sa kanilang constitution, bawal sa kanilang constitution principles. We are a country that produces tobacco. I agree. Can we do a comprehensive ban? Pwede pag-usapan sa legislation. But as it stands right now, our legislation doesn't even allow comprehensive ban. But hopefully we can go to that point, some other point in time, to help the farmers as well. But at this point in time, during the time that we were asked to comment, we already agreed comprehensive ban or restrict, because that's what we can do, restrict. And that's what our laws provide, regulation. Now, nung sabi nung isang party, hindi ko na sasabihin po, sabi niya, hindi pwedeng restrict, dapat comprehensive ban. So nagkagulo na ng lahat, pati EU. They were all looking at us. The delegates were here present. They all went to us, asking for assistance, asking for help. And according to the chair, Chair Toy, lapit siya sa akin, sabi niya sa akin, Hubert, you gotta speak because you are the leader of this group. Sorry, Madam Chair, I'm not the leader of this group. I'm just protecting the interests of the Philippines. No, you have to speak. And I spoke. And I said, it's important that we have the word restrict in the guidelines because Article 13.2 and 13.3 recognizes that. It's the FCTC article. But the other party, again, refused. Ang gusto niya, comprehensive ban. Ano nagpagkasunduan? Para lang walang mag-block ng consensus. Nagkasunduan ay yung word restrict ay ilagay as a footnote. Any lawyer in his right sense of mind will object to a treaty obligation being regulated to a mere footnote in the guidelines. And that's where we had the problem. It did not recognize to our mind the importance of 13.3. As a way forward, we thought of, sige, payag tayo na ilagay natin sa footnote, but let's get the confirmation of the Secretariat. Ano ang legal import ng putting restrict in a footnote? Kapag it has no difference, it has the same legal import as if it were in the text, then we will agree. And that's what happened, Madam Chair. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we never blocked consensus. It's always a way forward. And the way forward was in 19 article in the TAPS provisions of 13.2 and 30.3. We agreed that ilagay na lang sa footnote. So I don't understand again why we are being made as one of those countries who are in the dirty Ashtray, Madam Chair. If you guys were just present, and I will, if I were being asked to head the delegation again, I will invite Siatka, I will invite Dr. Limpin. Please join us. Because, you know, as I've mentioned many times over and over again, it's very difficult to balance interests of parties. But I think we do the good job, Madam Chair. Maraming salamat.
Mr. President, Mr. President. Mr. Secretary, thank you for your explanation. I understand. I've been a participant in conferences many times. I will just, my short comment is simply that perhaps precisely why some of your colleagues from other countries look towards you is because the Philippines does have a reputation of really being in the forefront of negotiations. And that's why it remains to be a disappointment that the position that it appears that you take is always in terms of not pursuing a policy that protects health. Again, I will repeat because you keep on saying that you do not understand. Well, I will repeat. If you will say that you are here to support a balanced approach which includes the interests of the farmers, nakakalito even for me na aral ko ang tobacco issues, ang legislation, na kung farmers ang gusto mong proteksyonan, bakit mo pipigilan at nag-a-appear na pinipigilan yung mga articles tungkol sa testing and measuring? That is not meant to hurt the farmers. That is meant to protect all people na matest ng maayos. Yun lang yung point nung Dirty Ashtray Award kasi yung provisions na to na gustong maisulong, hindi nga naisulong. So there's a lot of confusion na sinasaksak nyo na kasi we are a tobacco growing o di kaya nga ano yung naitulong nyo sa mga farmers. And for the benefit of Senator Alan Cayetano, and I need to give him to the floor now, I had asked pointedly, since they keep on saying that the reason that they have a delegation with all these people present, ano ang naitulong sa mga farmers directly? Dahil the data shows that the farmers are the poorest sector. And the tobacco farmers, I do not have any other data that shows na mas angat sila sa ibang klaseng farmers. Wala namang nakasagot sa akin. So ang point ko, so bakit pa natin ginagawa to? Yun naman yung point ko. Again, Mr. Secretary, out of respect, you wanted to say something, I'll give you the floor, then I have to give it to my brother na siya lang yung hindi ko pinansin ng ganito katagal dahil kapatid ko naman siya. So I haven't even acknowledged his presence. May we acknowledge the presence of Senator Cayetano? Just a short response.
Thank you for acknowledging my presence after 53 years of existence.
Madam Chair, maraming salamat po. Short response na, Madam Chair. On the procedure lang. Ang naka on the table, Madam Chair, at that point in time was ang choices lang ay either expert group or working group. Kapag may deadlock po, ibig sabihin po ng deadlock kapag may mga bansa na maraming gustong actually expert group, may mga bansang gustong working group, at may maski marami ang expert group, konti lang ang gusto ng working group. Wala pong consensus 'yon. At ang motto po, ang theme po ng FCTC is to arrive at a consensus. The next step po doon ay botohan. Ayon po sa Rule 50 ng FCTC, pag nagkabotohan po yan, para manalo ang isang point, whether it's for the expert group or working group, kailangan ng 3/4. At definitely po, wala hong 3/4 either group. If walang 3/4 either group, dadalhin po yung issue na yan sa COP11. Since dadalhin sa COP11 yan, kami po sa Philippine delegation, gusto namin tapusin na. Gusto namin magkaroon ng way forward. At ang way forward na naisip namin is a working group working with an expert group. Yan po ang aming proposal. Of course, may mga bansa, gaya ng sabi ni Dr. Limpin, ay medyo naguluhan. Pero sa amin po, hindi pang guguluho yun. Because it's a way forward, that the way we look at it, and it's a proposal even acknowledged by the committee chairs to Chair Toy. So that's what.
I understand, Mr. Secretary. I've understood you from around the second time you started explaining this. This is around the fifth time you're explaining it. I understand. My point is, I hope you also understand that when you come to the table with this balanced policy and say that it is for the benefit of the Filipino farmers, pero ang naaapektuhan ng mga provisions are things like testing and monitoring, then nako-confuse. And even I would conclude, was that meant to help or not? Kaya yon. And then may history na tayo. So sadly for you, you come in with a history na 4 na taon nang rin na nabigyan ng Pilipinas. So kumbaga, you don't come in with a clean slate. So may burden tayo to show. And I say tayo because you represent the Philippines. And I trust that you intend to represent us well. And I understand your explanations. I do. Pero you also have to understand kung ano yung pinanggagalingan and ano yung paradigm that you're working in. Okay? Thank you. Senator Alan.
Hello. Magandang hapon po, everyone. Madam Chair, Senior Deputy Executive Secretary, sa lahat po sa civil society, magandang hapon. Let me start with a biblical principle, no? Kasi we can debate on opinions, we can debate on strategy. Dapat hindi tayo nagde-debate on facts. But in this present world, maraming debate sa facts. And take note, yan po ang isang strategy ng tobacco industry, to muddle the facts, no? But I don't think there's any way that we can debate on principle. For example, kung anong ating itatanim, yan ang ating aanihin. So of course, there are positions being made here today, but the reality is, unless we have a program for the tobacco farmers to get richer and to shift, and unless we block the tobacco lobby in our country, many people will die because of tobacco-related disease. And I'm sorry to hear, Hubert, I know you're a man of integrity, and it's hard to say that yung sa dad mo, our father died of Hepa B na naging stomach cancer. But the irony is, yung mga kapatid niya, tatay niya, malakas uminom, siya hindi. Diba? But I mean, I know how hard it is to use that an example. So I know it came from the heart. So thank you for that. No? May I ask the first question sa DOH? How much are we spending on tobacco-related disease?
Yes, Madam Chair, we'll get the amount later, but that would be the amount for non-communicable diseases, the promotion for tobacco prevention.
Ma'am, sorry ha. First of all, I'm disappointed wala si Secretary here. He should be the one being the champion here, no? So when we're talking about tobacco, okay lang if I suddenly ask you about measles, about mumps, pero tatanungin ko kayo about tobacco, hindi nyo alam on your fingertips magkano ang ginagastos ng gobyerno on tobacco-related disease. No wonder this delegation is taking the balanced approach. So how much are we spending?
Yes, Madam Chair. So 4.8% of our GDP is the amount used for current NCD burden. We'd like to point out again po that.
So what's that in peso amount, ma'am? Yeah, that's the burden. I'm asking how much is the government spending? Ano na yan? PhilHealth, DOH, AIX, MAIP. Dapat meron kayo niyan. Actually, ginugol ko lang, meron na eh.
To 300. Madam Chair, it's roughly 300 million.
Oh, wow. Kasi in 2016, it was 44.6 billion eh.
Billion, I'm sorry.
So it went down to...
Billion.
Oh, so it's 300 billion now. Okay. If we stop smoking and give that amount to the farmers, how much will the farmers get? Diba we have 30,000 farmers, right? Sorry? 20. 20,000 families. Okay. Kasi 20,000 families, if you give them 10,000, that's 20 million? 200 million. 200 million times 36 months, times 12 months, that's only 2.4 billion. You're spending 300 billion in amount, and you have about 250 billion in your budget for ayuda. So if we're going to have a 5-year plan to help the farmers plant something else, ang dami-dami pong technology, Thailand, Vietnam, Israel, we have the money to support the farmers. That's at 10,000. How much is the average income? Anyone can, Deputy Secretary in ES, Senior Deputy Executive Secretary, anyone from agriculture, how much is the making the ordinary tobacco farmer?
It's earning 100,000 per hectare po.
Oh, and how is the average hectare per farmer? Don't tell me you don't have that data on hand. Guys, why do you come to the hearing not prepared? Di naman tayo grade school, di ba?
Mga, on the average po, mga half hectare po per farm. Half hectare po.
Oh, so 50,000 a year. So that's less than 5,000 a month. So if you give them 10,000, we're only going to spend 3 billion. How much is the tobacco industry in the Philippines? DOH, o DTI, NTA. Guys, sanay ako tinatawag ng teacher at hindi ako makasagot, ha. So, pero Senate hearing to at alam niyo naman yung privilege speech. So I expect you to have the data on hand. Nasaan yung NTA?
Yusek DV Savillana was the DA representative to
Yes.
the delegation, but he wrote a letter that he's not available today, and he said NTA can ably represent him. So yung questions mo for DA can
Yes.
be addressed to NTA.
Yes.
But anyone who can support with
And
an
for the
answer,
information of
please.
the people watching, hindi naman expected talaga na yung head or yung secretary ng isang department will know all the answers. That's why nga malaki yung delegation, and that's why you bring the different people, no? Usually the DFA, Yusek Charles, di ba, summarizes it and you have a quick meeting. But yung experts na dapat nakakalam. So how much is the tobacco industry in the Philippines? Wag nyo na ako ipag-Google. Sige, Google ko na rin dahil
Sir, excuse me po.
yes, please.
160 billion po.
160 billion. What's 20,000 times 50,000 times 12? Anyone can help me with the math? Let's see. Tama. 50,000 a hectare. Ilan bang beses mag-ani ang tabako?
It's lang po.
1. So in 1 year, 50,000. So 50,000 times, so that's 10, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So that's 1 billion pesos to the farmers. Magkano yung industry?
160 billion.
160 billion. Okay. So 159 billion goes to the kapitalista. So let's not say that we're protecting the farmers here. Kasi the farmers only get 1 billion eh. Kulang pa yon kasi yan yung kita. Yan ba net na yan or kasama pa puhunan dyan sa 50,000 per hectare?
Net na, sir.
Net na. No? So, okay, very clear yan. Ha? We're spending 300 billion a year on health-related. The industry is making 160 billion. So we're spending 140 billion over what the industry is making. And then the farmers are only getting 1 billion. So ako na ang pinakamahina sa math, baka sa mga senador at saka sa mga health at sa pamilya namin. But I think very glaring naman yung math doon that why don't we have a plan? And to be fair to this administration, I'm talking to all the administrations we were in. Because if we had the plan 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, hindi ganon. But of course, the tobacco growing regions, officials are saying this is for the farmers, but which I want to go to my first point, which is regulatory capture. Okay, I'd like to congratulate the chair, not because she's my sister, but because alam niyo naman I was a former chair of the Blue Ribbon and we handled very, very controversial cases. ZTE, fertilizer scam, many scams involving a couple of presidents. Afterwards, I was active dun sa PDAF scam. In the last Congress, my family, dami na, no? But all of this dealt with the garden variety of corruption. Diba? Yung either BIR or customs na may lagayan, or whether it's a contract na may share ka or may lagayan. But we really haven't discussed regulatory capture that much in our government and society. And to be fair to this administration, I'm talking about all administrations. So, Madam Chair, thank you because I know you had a discussion with our very able Director General Rudy Kimbo, who I started working with. He took office when I was the chair. And I know there was a discussion kung eto ba ay malfeasance, misfeasance, nonfeasance, paano naging Blue Ribbon. And I was also banging my head. But on the way here, I was watching Facebook, listening to everyone. I don't doubt the sincerity and your integrity. The problem for me is when we present ourselves as anti-tobacco but we're pro-tobacco. Okay lang kasi sa akin na we're presenting ourselves anti-tobacco, so anti-tobacco tayo. But we cannot present ourselves as anti-tobacco kung pro-tobacco tayo. So which goes to my second point na walang such thing as balance. Diba? But would like to discuss regulatory capture. What is regulatory capture? Yeah. I'll read it na lang from Google ha, para hindi tayo magkamali. Director General, please send a congratulations to Google for being our best witness today. Yeah. In politics, regulatory capture is a form of corruption of authority that occurs when a political entity, policymaker, or regulator is co-opted to serve the commercial, ideological, or political interests of a minor constituency, such as particular geographic area, industry, professional, ideological group. My favorite example there is in my first term, libre pa yung text eh. It was part of what Globe and Smart offered. But bigla silang ng piso-piso. And then they did not pursue the internet right away kasi text capital of the world tayo. So at that time, they were lobbying sa NTC. But I have to be honest, throughout my political career, I've been four times congressman, third term ko to as senator. Dumating yung time, yung telcos na nagre-recommend sa presidente kung sinong gusto nilang NTC chair. O yan ang regulatory capture, di ba? So, hindi ko nila lahat Senior Deputy Executive Secretary, but may mga kasama din kasi kayo talaga sa COP na known na advocates of the tobacco industry. So siyempre, if it walks like a duck, smells like a duck, quacks like a duck, it is a duck. Di ba? So dun pa lang kasi sa COP, ano yun eh? Law din yun eh. It's a treaty, di ba? So how can we keep saying that we're talking about RA 11900? We're not only talking about RA 9100, we're talking about three laws here, the Philippine Constitution. So since we're both lawyers naman, Deputy, there's a provision on health in the Constitution, right? In the general principles. Tama ba? Yeah. So the Senior Deputy Secretary is nodding. Is there any provision on tobacco in the Constitution? Wala, no? But of course, commerce, agriculture, meron. To be fair, di ba? Okay. Then we are signatory to a treaty. And under the law, the Constitution, if you sign a treaty and the Senate ratifies, it becomes part of our law, hindi po ba? Oh. So, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but yung unang gago kasi dito is the last Congress for passing this law. Okay? So, I'm saying it not as a mura, but as a description of how Congress was also part of the regulatory capture. Nung speaker ako, nilapit sa akin yung batas na yon. No way. No way. Okay? Paano pinasa tong batas na to, Deputy? Are you familiar? No. Can you use the mic, sir?
No, I'm not familiar with
Sige.
Mr. Chair.
Is anyone familiar here? Except for the advocates, I know you're all familiar. While I'm looking for the timeline, last December 2021, nag-number 1 ako for senatorial candidate in Pulse Asia. Sinabihan na ako, tigilan mo na magsalita sa isabong and stop talking about the vape law because those two have so much money, you're going to lose so many votes. Yun So, pataas ng pataas. I was always number 2 or 3, but for 1 month, I was number 1. I finished number 7. I don't blame anyone. May iba pang reasons, times, but that's how powerful this lobby is. Na pag tinarget ka talaga sa mga distrito, may pera talaga sila. At that time, may isabong pa. I'm glad I did not stop because natigil yung isabong. Unfortunately, nautakan tayo sa vape. Okay, so they could not file it during my time as speaker. So they had the first reading in March 17, 2021, second reading in May 19, 2021, third reading on May 25, 2021. So kita nyo kung gaano ka-urgent tong bill na to. No? Within March, April, May, within 3 months, this very, very urgent vape bill was passed. Okay. Yeah, March, April, May. Sinama ko na, liberal na ako doon. Okay. So the Senate approved the disagreeing provisions on January 25, 2022. I guess what people don't know, I have this on first-hand information, meaning yung nagkwento sa akin was there. The tobacco magnates of this country went to see President Duterte. One of them was so frail, they didn't have to carry him in. And as soon as they sat down, sabi ni President Duterte, kita niyo kamay ko? Nanginginig dahil sa smoking. I forgot what he calls that disease. Can you say that on the mic, ma'am?
Burger's disease.
And that's not from eating too many burgers, di ba? That's from, galing saan yun, ma'am? So smoking was contributory there or main?
Smoking is the primary.
Smoking is, okay. So tinanong ko na doon, so ano nangyari? So umuwi sila lahat, hindi sila naka-first base kay President Duterte. Anong problema po? Binulsa po yung law. Stinap doon. And waited for the next administration. And then they allowed it to lapse into law on July 25, 2022. Would the Senior Deputy ES know how many agencies recommended veto?
I'm not aware of that, Madam Chair, because at that point in time.
At that time, you were 25 days there.
No, not even that. I was appointed first as Assistant Presidential Legal Counsel in
Yes.
August 2022, and then as Senior Deputy Executive Secretary.
And even if you were ES, you would probably have
a ton of documents, because it's a
documents,
transition.
etc. And to be fair to the present ES, it was the former ES at this time, di ba? Yeah, it was former ES Rodriguez. So,
Yes, sir.
I mean, I would expect them to answer and see the first page, but to read everything, no? So, can I go back to DOH, ma'am? What was the recommendation of DOH when this bill was passed?
Yes, Madam Chair, the DOH registered the veto to the Office of the President.
Yes. Okay. So, according to, just to show you how kalokohan tong law na to that we're saying we're trying to balance. According to the advocates, the vape is more healthy than cigarettes. So tama po ba ako, ma'am, na we were correcting them, sandali lang, hindi healthy yung cigarette, so how can it be more healthy? So binaliktad nila, it is less unhealthy than cigarettes. Okay, which if you again Google the strategies on tactics of the tobacco companies, which is important because that's the reason why we got the Ashtray Award for falling hook, line, and sinker into the tactics ng tobacco industry. And tobacco industry, sinasabi nila harm reduction to. But there's no proof of that. Okay, so what's the next thing they said? They said, well, since it's less unhealthy targetin natin ang smokers to shift. But this is my question. Why did they lower the age na pwedeng bumili from 21 to 18? So dati, bawal ang hanggang 21, 21 lang pwedeng bumili. So meaning, theoretically, dapat hindi nagsusmoke, hindi nagve-vape, yung 18, 19, 20. So nung binabaan natin, paano nangyaring ito less unhealthy? Hindi. The reality is we're trying to mold their taste because the tobacco companies, after decades and century of fooling people, of multi-billion-dollar lawsuits of keeping health data from people, is on the decline. And they're looking where to shift. Diba? So in the same manner that oil companies realize that younger people now want the environment to be preserved for future generations, some of them are going into renewables or to cleaner. So ibig sabihin, billion-billion company yun, so hindi basta magsasara. But ang linaw naman na mas maayos yung solar, yung wind, etc. sa oil, and wala naman nagdududa that we needed oil or fossil fuel during that time. But yung smoking, di ba, I mean, they can go into real estate, they can go into malls, they can go into health products, but they choose to shift to vape, but they're doing the same tactics. So what's my point in all of this? I understand you, sir, as a lawyer, as the head of delegation in saying try niyong i-balance. But I'm trying to give you the kabilang perspective. If you go to COP, for example, in the environment, you're either pro or anti-fossil fuels. Diba? If you go to a health conference, let's say on opioids, on the pandemic or the, what do you call it, epidemic or pandemic of opioids in the US, you go into the conference, you're either pro or anti. So I hear you, and lahat naman tayo naging kahit papano sa delegation, Yusek Charles, di ba? Napakahirap talagang pumasok sa isang conference na maghanap ng consensus. But the reality is, you either go in that the experts know that you are for or against. And the reality is the Philippines at this point in time, both with the law and with the representations made, is pro-tobacco. Diba? So I'm not accusing one person here. I'm accusing the whole government, including the past Congress, and hopefully we change that. If we follow the treaty and follow our constitution, we should amend this law instead of pointing it out, which is my next question. Would there be any violation if you did not push for that law and you pushed for the more progressive parts of the treaty? Kasi you keep saying my law. I heard also the advocates of Congress saying, my law, we had to represent it faithfully. Hindi BICAM to International conference to ng sponsored ng yung COP nga tsaka WHO. So would there have been any violation if we went in and we were more progressive? We have this law, but we want to amend it. Would there have been any violation of that law?
If I may, sir, the FCTC, sir, recognizes, as I mentioned, there are two types of classification. Those who can do comprehensive ban, 13.3 and 13.2, and those countries who cannot do comprehensive ban but may restrict, which is Article 13.3. So if you look at it, we are, in a sense, we fall under 13.3.
No, on that point, and on your explanation on the experts, etc., I sort of understand. I have a question about the experts, but what I meant is that when you started the framework, and I was just reading the reports of the other people who spoke sa media, ang parati nilang dinadahilan, may batas po tayo So we had to go there to represent our law because that's our law. So nire-reverse ko. If we went there and saying, this is our law, but we agree na dapat ganito, and we'll ask Congress to amend the law, would there be a violation of law if that was the position of our delegation?
Well, before we left, though, it was clearly within the agreement was really to showcase our legislation. We never thought of looking at the other way around. So if we had a chance to look at it that way, we may have to look at it or think about it twice, because we may be in the violation of our own legislation if we promote something which is not indicated in our legislation.
Yeah, I understand, sir. You're a very high-ranking official, so Di ba? And you're a lawyer, so you have to be careful of what you say because it may be seem like as policy. But let me just give you an example. So the president attended WEF. In WEF, maraming liberalization gusto doon, pero hindi pwede sa constitution natin. He didn't say no kasi hindi pwede yung constitution natin. Our delegations, our DTI did not say no. Our speaker did not say no. What you said is, sige, let's amend the economic provisions of our constitution. So pwede. You're not bound by the law. Diba? Hindi to parang ang law is no death penalty, they're forcing you death penalty. You'll say, na sandali lang, dalawa lang yan death penalty o hindi. The convention is building consensus nga so that all the other countries change their legislation, diba, to be more anti-tobacco given that scientific fact just shows that it's there. Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Senator. Hindi po nagtatapos pa yung aming trabaho as I mentioned, no? Meron po kami isang pagpupulong lahat ng members ng delegation because we don't have the report yet. And we will submit the report to both Congress and the OT,
And I think
especially the recommendations.
I think that's a good part na bring up tong issue na to. I know feelings are hurt with words that are used, but sanay naman tayo lahat na may konting galos, konting bugbog, and I'm sorry if I'm ano ng konti sa iba because nga it's an emotional issue for us. I was willing to, hindi naman lose the election, but hoping I wouldn't. But I was willing to put it on the line because I believe in this issue. So if there's one thing that good that will come out of this nga is mapag-usapan yan. But again, going to why it matters, whether it's the experts or it's the state, how do you call it, state working group, diba? Kasi during the pandemic, all countries around the world said, let's listen to experts. Diba? Kasi nga, mamamatay na lahat So, wala kang choice. Walang may alam ng virus except the experts. Ang problema, pag wala ng pandemic, we don't want to listen to the experts anymore. Kasi we tell them there has to be other considerations. Diba? We have to think of this or that or ganyan. That's why, mas gusto ng tobacco companies yung state. Kasi mas madali nilang i-mold yung utak ng politicians than yung doctors. Kasi yung doctors, mapapaya sila if mag-pro-tobacco sila. Diba? And they're the experts. Diba? That's why the makers of this law wanted DTI, not FDA, to look into the contents. Can you imagine ang shampoo FDA? Nilalagay mo lang sa book yun. Oh. Samantalang yung vape, ipapasok mo sa katawan mo, ayaw nilang padaanin sa FDA. Gusto nilang padaanin. So, it's really ridiculous, di ba? And for those of you hearing this for the first time, it is ridiculous. It does happen. And when we get mad at you and point a finger at you, we're pointing 3 more fingers at ourselves because it was legislation. But that's why, ma'am, I'm emotional about the secretary not being here. He's supposed to, this is his platform. When he was not yet secretary, he stood up for anti-tobacco. He promised me na ma-confirm lang siya, tatayuan niya to. Because sa confirmation, meron mga pro-tobacco. Oh, he left yesterday, di ba? He couldn't leave today. Hindi pwedeng iba mag-represent sa kanya sa Korea kasi donation ng TB drugs, hindi ba fully funded ang TB drugs sa atin?
Yes,
Hindi ba fully covered din ng PhilHealth yung TB drugs?
Madam Chair, Senator, the event is for today, so he had to leave yesterday.
Okay. And it's on TB drugs,
Yes.
which is fully funded naman by PhilHealth and by DOH.
We will still need the
Yeah.
funds.
Can you check sa Taguig late kayong nag-deliver? Hindi kayo nag-deliver ng TB drugs.
We will
Hindi,
check
walang
on
biroan.
the letter.
It was a big issue for us 1 month ago.
I'm
No,
told
so-
I'm told it's late all over the country. In
Yeah.
fact, that's
So
a possible
that's my point.
topic also.
I mean, if this was a agri issue, I will look for the Secretary of Agriculture. The burden here shouldn't be only on the head of delegation because he's just doing his job. If Yusek Charles was here, he would also be given instruction. Siya yung nakaupo dyan, pero hindi naman siya ang pwedeng sumagot for DA-DOH. So, can you please text the secretary so that we'll not need to subpoena him for the next hearing? Will he guarantee that he'll be in the next hearing or do we have to subpoena him? Please ha, para
Yes,
malinaw
Madam Chair,
tayo.
Mr.
Kasi
Senator.
I want to know how hard he fought for, you can tell him this para fully prepared. I want to know how much he advocated the anti-tobacco stand before this delegation left. Last 2 points, Madam Chair. DepEd, nandito po DepEd. Sir, question lang, nasa curriculum ba, tinuturo ba that smoking is bad for us and
Yes, sir.
tobacco is bad?
Yes, sir.
So ano yan, covered yan?
Yes, sir.
Oh, kasi, you know, in the early years of Singapore, so many problems. One problem was racial unity or diversity or unity in diversity. And the Chinese Singaporeans wouldn't join the military and the police. Ang ginawa ni Lee Kuan Yew, DepEd, 10 years, baguhin nyo yan. They changed the attitudes of people. So in 10 years, sumali na ng military at police yung Chinese Singaporeans. They had a much better balance na. So I should have said more like this when I started in 2028 kasi when you're young, you look at 3 years, 6 years. When you're older, nakikita mo na if I started working pala on the tobacco farmers in 1998, if I started talking to them, of course, the Senator Pia only came in 2004, no? But you get my point, no? So maybe you can submit to the committee lang paano to tinuturo. Because the reality is, for example, government now, again, Senior Deputy, yes, not only this government, last government yung online sabong, ngayon online casino. Napakahirap kasi that we make it legal. Then we tell, di ba kasi children copy what parents do. They do not listen to what parents say. So if the government says, wag kayo magsugal, work hard, but nababasa nila, PAGCOR, record 50 billion, PCSO, online na. Eh may cellphone yung 10-year-old eh. Di ba? So I'd really like to see how DepEd is dealing with the vices. And bawal naman talaga mag-advertise ang tobacco, no? So what's my last point for farmers expert? Yeah. Siguro, Madam Chair, because we have last 10 minutes, I'll give it back to you. But I just like to pursue yung kay Deputy Executive Secretary na we're interested what will happen next. But magka-age tayo, di ba? More or less. Tama ba, di ba?
Maraming salamat. Mas matanda po ako.
Konti lang. I mean, but magka-generation naman tayo.
6 years, sir.
Okay.
5 years.
Tayo, Charles.
Sir, I'm 10 years older.
Okay. So, sorry, but more or less magka-generation tayo. Napanood niyo yung West Wing? Di ba? So, there's nothing wrong na in one government, nag-argue yung different branches. There's nothing wrong that agriculture is arguing for tobacco and the DOH is arguing anti-tobacco. You might say kasi pag nag-away-away dito yung opisyal, ang gulo ng Marcos administration. Hindi po. In each administration, kung ano sakop mo, so makikita mo yung superpowers, yung military, pwedeng gusto nang gumante, yung diplomats, usap muna. Di ba? Yung scientist, gustong ganito, yung commerce. So for example, in developing countries, yung Department of Commerce or Industry, ayaw na yung mga clean air, etc. Kasi nga, maganda takbo ng negosyo. Pero yung Department of Environment nila, let's be responsible. Di ba? Tayo nagpro-produce niyan, so we have to be. So, I just want the public to know that it is not anyway an indication of any chaos or disagreement in government when policy is being discussed. In the same way that there is a civil way for the House to push for charter change and for the Senate to respond, di ba? Kaya kami may BICAM eh. So I'm really hoping tempers will calm down. But I do understand kasi mismo temper ko. I'm sorry to the DOH. I didn't mean to be ganun abrasive. You can take my blood pressure later. I think bumaba na. But I'm sorry for being like that. But it's just such a sensitive issue na to. Because nga, every single day, how many people die every day of tobacco related? I think 321 a day. So every single day na hindi natin na-solve to, you multiply that. So look at the 10-year. I don't think we can solve the problem ng tobacco farmers in 3 years, 5 years, maybe 5, maybe 10 years, if we really work on it, di ba? But every single day that we delay, ganun karami ang namamatay at sa tobacco related pa lang 'yon. 'Di ba? Ang vape at e-cigs magkaiba eh. 'Di ba? Oo. And lumalabas pa lang ang research sa vape ngayon. So let me close with this. I remember nung first term akong congressman, excited na excited ako because first time ko makakita ng instant na tubig na nalilinis. So from the Laguna Lake, they were getting water, then handing it out. Since I was the congressman doon sa Taguig, sa tabi ng lake, I got a glass, I drank it. Masarap, malinis, clean. So I went to my dad telling him about it. He gave me the look and then said, maghintay muna tayo ng 1 month kung okay o hindi. And I realized I was so fast, I was using my eyes. 'Di ba? I did not take a sample kung may amoeba ba 'yon, may bacteria or whatever. So that's a congressman who can make that mistake. So I'll end this way. Hindi ba trabaho natin to warn people, guys? Hindi pa natin sure sa epekto ng vape. But at the meantime, we will tell you what is in it para maka-decide kayo. That's why si President Duterte noon, ayaw niyan may flavors. Kasi may scientific evidence na yung flavors, yung nilalagay nilang chemicals is really harmful. So I would really like us to have a policy that will help farmers, help those who will be affected by the shift in the industry, but also, diba, na we already start warning young people of this. Kasi the reality is, diba, I mean, I think decades na silang bawal mag-advertise, di ba? Kasi yung una nilang advertising, they really made people look cool eh. I saw the advertising when they started targeting women and parang cool din ang women pag naninigarilyo. And the reality is rin talaga, di ba? Even in high school ganyan, parang mas cool ka talaga kapag ka, di ba? Until you reach our age and mataas na cholesterol mo, mataas na sugar mo, di ba? Then we realize yung inom natin only, yung kakasmoke natin only is bad. So it's our job to warn them. So Madam Chair, thank you very much for that. And to the whole delegation, thank you for being here.
Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. In response to the Chair and the Honorable Senator Cayetano, the Secretary has replied. Sure, my apologies. I will be happy to attend the next Blue Ribbon hearing on vape tobacco issue. As Secretary of Health, my role is to protect our Filipino youth and adults from the ill effect of these products.
Thank you very much for that, Madam Chair. Please thank the Secretary for me. And Madam Chair, may I request that he be ready to tell us, no? Kasi he didn't take office that long pa naman. But it was before this COP. So I'd like to know how he used his office to advocate and what position he advocated. Was he part of the balanced approach or was he the same as when was before? I'm not making any judgment because I don't know. So I'll wait for his presentation with your permission, Madam Chair.
Just for the information of DepEd and DILG, and Senator Alan, everyone, I think it was, I don't know who, somebody mentioned that I think DILG is strictly following or trying to implement the 100 meters away from school. Yeah, for the record, the kind of fights that I fight is I push for 200 meters, talo. Why wouldn't you allow 200? Why wouldn't you accept 200 meters? Why wouldn't you allow this to be farther from the reach of children? So that, Mr. Secretary, is the reason why you came into this position na ganun na yung tingin naming mga advocates sa nagre-represent sa Philippines. Kasi time and again, they pretend to be pro-health and yet every action we take is not pro-health. Dun nang gagaling yun. And you do have that burden na you had to fill in those shoes as head of delegation without the knowledge of all of these things that have transpired. Very quickly, because we do have very involved resource persons here. We have session at 3 o'clock. You were both not, your agencies were not involved, were not in the conference, but you have been very active in the fight against tobacco. So can you just give a quick statement, and then your full statement will be part of the record. Ms. Angelica Ramirez of Child Rights Network.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I be allowed to give a little shout out, to use their slang? Yung mga kasama ko pong mga young people,
young leaders na very excited no na magkaroon ng opportunity to be here in this Blue Ribbon committee hearing. Ang Child Rights Network po simula nung nagsimula na-discover talaga, na-establish noong 2007. Marami-rami na rin po yung mga batas na isa ang Child Rights Network sa mga umalalay, sa mga legislators and mga advocates. Pero by observation, ito po laban sa tobacco control ang isa sa mga maaaring pinakamahirap na laban na kakaharapin ng network. That's why we're very glad na nabigyan kami ng espasyo to be able to express our insights and recommendations na perspektibo ng mga bata at kabataan. So we would like to emphasize our gratitude to you, Madam Chair, and the Blue Ribbon Committee. Meron lang po akong gustong i-emphasize na maikling mga highlights ng mga recommendations, pero kaisa po kami kasama ng mga advocates dito na nag-express ng disappointment and actually heartbroken kami dahil sa tingin namin hindi kinampihan ng ating Philippine delegation ang kapakanan ng mga bata doong dumalo sila sa COP10. At dahil dito ang ilan sa mga recommendations namin unang-una ay to continue holding the Philippine delegation to the COP10 accountable dahil it is apparent that they did not champion public health lalo na ang protection of children and youth. But instead carried the position of the industry doon sa nakaraang COP10. Pangalawa, we wish that the government will strictly enforce existing laws that protect the government from interference of the industry. Babanggitin ko lang po, ito ay ang Department of Health Civil Service Commission Joint Memorandum Circular 2010-01, which aims to implement FCTC Article 5.3 by prohibiting interactions between the tobacco industry and the government. At para po sa amin na nasa Child Rights Network, mahalaga po ito na pananggalang para ang kapakanan ng mga bata ay hindi masanggi ng nasa kabilang panig ng advokasya na ito. Pangatlo, i-cancel na po natin, no, using the slang of young people, yung harm reduction narrative. Dahil we wish to reiterate na ang totoong harm reduction is a public health strategy. Hindi po dito dapat involved ang pag-introduce ng new and addictive products into the open market. Very concerned po kami kasi alam po natin ang sinasabi ng mga studies na ang prefrontal cortex ay nade-develop at 25 years old. So we're talking about young people, sabi nga ng Global Youth Survey, Global Youth Tobacco Survey, 1 in 7 Filipino students 13 to 15 years old ay na-expose na sa mga e-cigarettes and vapes. So nakakabahala po na may ganitong naratibo na naglulure sa ating mga kabataan na sumubok, no, ng mga makabagong paraan mga makabakong tobacco. At panghuli, we wish that this Congress will pass the bill regulating electronic smoking devices. Para po sa aming mga advocates, ito ang totoong nagcha-champion ng karapatan ng mga bata at kabataan, hindi ang vape law. And kapag pinasa po ng Kongresong ito ang mandatory bill or a mandatory law na ito, it will undo the errors of the vape law at babalik sa 21 years old, no? Dahil ibinaba po ng vape law sa 18. So kami pong mga nasa child rights advocacy, palaging pataas dapat, katulad din po ng sinusuportahan nila Madam Chair, pataas dapat yung age. Bakit natin gustong babaan? Kasi marami na tayong wins pero bakit ibinalik sa 18 years old? At sinusuportahan din po yun nung studies na 25 years old nga na de-develop yung prefrontal cortex. So bakit ina-expect natin na yung 18 years old kaya na nilang discern, no? Lalo na yung tungkol sa kanilang kalusugan. We strongly emphasize the urgency of strengthening tobacco control measures and protecting our policies from the influence of the tobacco industry. So please, hands off our children and young people. Huwag niyo po silang targetin. And we will work together to prevent a future generation of Filipinos grappling with lifelong, irreversible, and transgenerational consequences arising from nicotine addiction and all the other harms brought by the use of these unsafe products. Kanina pa po namin naririnig yung balanced position, and we respect our Philippine delegation, ating pong mga legislators. Pero kapag po kapakanan ng mga bata at kabataan yung pinag-uusapan, bias po kami. At bias po kami dun sa kanilang kapakanan. Maraming salamat po, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Very nice. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
can I just request the Senior Deputy Executive Secretary to take that into consideration? Take a second look at using the word balance. Kasi nga, for advocates and it's, I know from a negotiator, from a DFA point of view, balance, but really from an advocate point of view, it's either you're pro or anti. I'm just saying, take a look at it kasi may mga meetings pa naman kayo. And thank you very much for that, short but very strong advocacy.
And then we'll call on Attorney Paula Tangking from Action for Economic Reforms. They were very active with us during the syntax deliberations and many others.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We already submitted our position paper, but we'd like to point out some highlights. We note that it's ironic for us, the Philippines, who have been looked upon in the international, international as one of the best practices in tobacco taxation to be awarded the Dirty Ashtray Award. So it's kind of ironic. Nanalo tayo sa isa, and yet parang it's a shame na we did receive this award. We just want to highlight some recommendations, Madam Chair. First, that the Philippine government must always take into account the overriding concern and framework for our participation in the FCTC, in other WHO activities and similar multilateral international hearings is public health. Tobacco control is essentially about public health. So our government delegates to FCTC and similar conventions or summits must be made accountable to advancing and defending public health. The FCTC is not the place for the government delegation to even balance health and competing commercial or for-profit interests. Next, given that FCTC is primarily about health, we join the stand of the other civil societies here that the Philippine delegation must be led by the Secretary of Health. Other members of the delegation must take the cue from the Department of Health on FCTC issues. With due respect to the Deputy Executive Secretary, the DFA earlier through Yusek Jose acknowledged that FCTC is highly about health and regulation, and that on this matter, they adhere to the Department of Health. And yet, that is not what we have seen so far. And finally, Madam Chair, while we are discussing several issues on the recent COP10, and as mentioned earlier by the head of the delegation that they plan to have an enforcement framework to stop selling e-cigarettes to the youth, the Philippine government must insist on the correct definition and practice of harm reduction, especially on the use of electronic nicotine and non-nicotine devices. When even the industry recognizes the need for the regulation because of their harmful effects, the issue of it, not just on sale, but also on marketing to non-smokers, especially the youth, must also be addressed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Very much. I'll remind DOH and particularly FDA, that submit so that before the next hearing, I want to see what you have already in what you have done in terms of the equipment, the personnel you need for proper testing, registration, and so on and so forth. And whatever collaboration you have, because I think before you arrived, I also gave a bit of history that during the time of Secretary Mon Lopez, he told me that they already had equipment. And then in the hearing 3 months ago, they told me they're buying. So paikot-ikot lang tayo, niloloko lang ako. Kahit ako, niloloko ako na may equipment, walang equipment, may tao, walang tao. Anyway, I'd like to also end on this note, to show you, Dr. Sakate, please. So these are examples of some vapes, e-cigs. This one is called Korean dessert. Clearly, as you would know, Yusek Sanchez, outlawed. You're not allowed to show pictures of desserts. Okay? But at the very least, and of course, I have no idea if this is accurate, meron siyang list of ingredients. So that's why we really know, because technically, even before they put this here, just like any other food, cosmetic product, you test it kung tama yung nilalagay niyang laman yan. Oh, and then this one has nothing. This has nothing. This doesn't even try to comply with the laws. So I hope you understand, those of you who are not in the health and trade, because it's the two that are primarily involved. This is what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Okay? Very attractive to kids. This is very neon, very metallic. very
Madam Chair, on that point lang.
watermelon.
On that point, I remember every budget hearing, we asked the Optical Media Board, especially nung wala pang Netflix, o ilan ang nahulin yung pirated? Kasi nga, alam naman natin kahit saan pwede kang bumili ng pirated. So, sinong agency ang dapat proactive na tinitignan yung mga shops and making sure na
DTI.
hindi. DTI. So, do you already have task force going there? Yeah. So, maybe next hearing you can report and
They
show
did.
us how do you.
They said they issued thousands of showcase orders, but show cause orders. But I was like, oh, and
Oh,
then
ba't hindi ba huli ka agad pag nakita mo doon na patently illegal sa online? Yeah, anyway, can you present? But ang point ko, magandang example yung Optical Media Board, di ba na whether it was Senator Bong Revilla or whoever, nandito they'll say, 10,000 ho na confiscate namin, 1,000 ho sa Green Hills, 1,000 ganun. Kasi nga, the point is, may regulation na. So if it's less than 100 meters, sarado na yan. If they're selling yung bawal, tanggalin yung mayor's permit niyan, di ba? So let's just show some teeth dun sa nandiyan na yung regulation eh. So you have to follow that. But if they violate it, let's show na we mean business, no? So I'm not saying you're not. I just want to see in the next hearing with your permission, Madam Chair, na di ba na kung kasi ang Pilipino sumusunod pagka ano, alam nilang i-enforce eh. Pero pag tingin nilang hindi, di ba? Itutuloy lang nila.
yes.
Madam Chair, we were able to get some of the specifics, because as mentioned earlier, that we do have testing for the devices. But what the budget that was cut for us, and so that prevented us from purchasing another equipment, was for e-liquid and HTP vapor gas. So if there is any support that can be given to us or in
Who
collaboration
cut
with
your
FDA,
budget?
we was requested at the budget submission level, and then for the 2023, but it was not budgeted.
So kasama siguro sa conspiracy yun, na kinakat yung budget ng testing. I wouldn't be surprised, seriously.
So in that regard,
But
we would
sadly, there's so many people in your office who knows that I'm the advocate. How come no one told me? You don't even try. You don't even try to get a bigger budget. I would have given you a bigger budget. I would have sacrificed other advocacies I have to give the budget to you.
we did submit
Because you
for
don't
additional
bother
budget.
to take. And then kayo naman sa health, you know that I'm counting on you. You know that I'm counting on you to have our backs, to look after these kids, because DTI, that is not at the forefront of their consciousness. Wala naman sa mandate niyo yung health, nasa sa inyo. So every step of the way, you should be there watching. Nobody brought it to my attention. It's very annoying. O so ano nga tayo yun? Titigan. Titigan tayo ngayon. Titigan tayo tinlex budget. Wala tayong pan-testing. My God, puro lokohan ang ginagawa natin dito.
Madam Chair, there's an easy solution to that. Ban the sale until na test. Magbabayad pa yung tobacco industry para bumili ng makina para sa inyo. Ganun lang kasimple yun. I mean, I don't know we'll do it, but that's the simple thing. Subukan nyo, FDA, walang gamit. Bibilan niya ng tobacco para lang gumalaw yung sales nila. It's just, I mean, it's not only the tobacco industry. Diba? If I sell pork and I cannot sell it habang walang inspectors, I'll pay for the inspectors para mabenta.
And we will continue to work with the DILG also in terms of enforcement, because part of our limitation is really in closing down some of, taking down the retraction of mayor's permits is probably the more effective way of doing things.
Madam Chair, sorry on that point lang Kasi when you catch people violating the law, all you have to do is call the police. So better talaga kung may DLG, may kasama na kayo. But let's say you're in the store, they're selling illegal.
Yes. I mean,
all you have to do is call the police and
yes,
go
of
there and
course.
say
No,
bawal to. But I hear you. I'm just saying
institutional.
yung Optical
I mean,
Media Board kasi wala rin naman silang
yes.
pero until Netflix was
Yes, we continue po. We do po.
Ay, nagkakaintindihan tayo.
Apo,
but yes,
we do that po. Just institutional lang po.
I'll end on this note, no? For all of those who have expressed surprise that this delegation received the Dirty Ashtray Award, one of the provisions that was questioned was the delegation's concern on the comprehensive ban on advertisement, no? Comprehensive ban on advertisement. And as I try to digest why would you want there to be advertisement of attractive colors, of flavors for the youth? Why would you want it if you're trying to protect the youth? We should be for a comprehensive ban. And yet here we are, hindi tayo pumapayag ng may comprehensive ban tayo. And yet yung industry, comprehensive yung tactics niya. Including itong pag-confuse sa inyo na nagtataka pa kayo, bakit tayo nagkaroon ng Dirty Ashtray Award? My ability to communicate it was probably not even comprehensive enough. Thankfully, my brother bothered to take time and try to explain it from a different point of view para lalong maintindihan ng mga nalilito kung bakit we deserve the Dirty Ashtray Award. And then we hear that after all these years of telling me that may budget and merong equipment na nandyan na daw, I'll find out na nakat yung budget, walang nag-abala, mag-request para madagdagan natin yung budget for the testing. And then we're arguing about the testing, pero wala naman tayong pang-test. It's a very comprehensive approach to making sure that our products are out there poisoning our youth. That is the approach, and that they're successful. And if any of you here, because all of you except for a few from the civil society, are in bed with the tobacco industry, that is a crime. And this committee will not stand for it. By not acting on your job, you are committing a crime. So work with me so we can protect the children of this country. Work with me so that those who have addictions can truly seek the medical help they need and not be persuaded by unregulated advertisement that simply tell them this is a safer alternative, this is a less harmful alternative. May I know from DOH, and very quickly, because I know you want to say something, but very quickly, may I know from FDA, has any of these tobacco companies gone to FDA and requested for, what do you call that permit, that permission to sell a product that is harm reduction, anong tawag doon? A cessation device, meron bang sa kanila?
As to date, ma'am, Madam Chair, there's no application because we
see?
don't have any policy yet po. It is yet to be to be determined.
Yeah, but regardless kung may policy ka o hindi, may lumapit ba?
Wala pa po.
O, wala nga. At magkaroon ka na rin ng policy, di ba? Para pag may lumapit, meron. But my point is, they're all trying to sell it. They'll say in any possible way, they will say that it's less harmful. It is less harmful. And yet, they will not go to FDA to get a certification that it is less harmful.
Yeah. Madam Chair, just one clarification lang kasi I'm concerned about the tobacco farmers. But I want to clarify, iba yung tobacco industry, iba yung farmers. Tama ba na yung e-cigs, you burn or you steam the tobacco? So may kilalaman yung tobacco farmers, tama?
No, non-burning.
Di ba? Oo. Pero yung vape, oil yun eh. Di ba? So wag natin idama yung tobacco farmers kasi the reality is pag lumagana pa nga yung vape, lalong mawawala yung tobacco farmer kasi they don't supply it eh. Kaya we refer to tobacco because it's the tobacco companies who are shifting to vape, no? Just so that the tobacco farmers will also know who's on their side or not eh. Kasi parang natin pinapalabas para sa tobacco farmers to, may balance. Hindi yung vape is not for the tobacco farmers, no. Anyone is free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I just wanted to clarify that. So we're battling here now.